My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs. I am joined by our Chief Technology Officer, Mark Milovanovic, and we're here today to help you with any career questions you may have in the technology sector. I can tell you personally, I've been working in tech now, well, it's a little over 25 years now. I've been an architect for over 25 years, a network architect, a security architect, an enterprise architect, a business architect. But I've also spent more than 2 decades helping people just like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech, negotiate big raises with your management team. So that's been my world, and I love helping people get to their goals. So once per week, me and my Chief Technology Officer come to answer any questions you may have on starting your career. I can tell you when I started mine, I didn't know what to do. And I went and got certification crazy because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. It's what I was told to do. I got 6 certifications. And in the end, nobody cared. And then when I found out what hiring managers really wanted, and I took those certifications and added those right skills, went on my first interview, got hired as a senior engineer, and was a lead architect within 3 months, and spent the next 25 years after that as an architect. And it's all about knowing where to go. And that way, you keep moving forward instead of a zigzag approach. And that's why we're here. Sometimes in life, we make zigzag approaches, but if we can avoid them, we want to help you get there quicker. Now, that's my background. Now, Mark Milovanovic is our Chief Technology Officer. He's been in tech now for more than a decade as well. Actually, more than that. He's also a Cisco certified internet expert, and he is a rock star when it comes to networking and security. But he also knows about a lot of tech careers, and he's here to help you. So ask your questions, and we'll do anything we can to help you. Before we begin, I wanted to tell you that tomorrow we have our webinar on how to become a cloud architect and get that first cloud architect job. And if you want to be a security architect, come to that webinar as well. An AI architect, feel free to come to the webinar. Enterprise architect, feel free to come to the webinar, because we coach all these architecture careers. And we'll tell you what we do, the kind of skills you'll kind of need, and what you'll need to be successful. And then we'll spend a good 60, 90 minutes on Zoom answering any career questions you have. So join us on that. And Mike, let me turn it over to you. You'll say hello, and then after that, we'll start taking some questions.
Hello, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful week so far. If you've been with us yesterday, too, we had a wonderful discussion about various things in regards to content delivery networks, how we can architect them, IPTV, things like that. By extension, today, we're back to our weekly schedule, you might call it that way, where we answer your career-based questions. We're definitely looking forward to seeing what you have available. But I do want to point out a couple of things. For those that are going to be making themselves available to join us tomorrow for the webinar on how to get your first cloud architect job, I believe in being prepared for the different webinars, for the different presentations and meetings that I'm a part of. I would encourage everybody to take a look at the description box below this video. And you'll notice there is a little ebook that you can download in kind of like supplementary format for you before you attend the Thursday webinar. That way, what can happen is as well, you can look at some of the questions you might have. And in case you don't necessarily get them answered there, you're always welcome to use that also as a basis regarding your questions that you might have for the Q&A as well. And of course, there's many other goodies like how to get your first job in the tech space. We also have additional documentation in regards to what does it mean to be a generative AI architect. So many great things, including workshops just such as the CCNA and the AWS. Now, I will point out this. If you've noticed, there is this wonderful little banner above me, right? Somewhere around here. And that one is for the how to get your first cloud architect job. But you'll notice also, it will kind of go back and forth between that and the 60% off special that we have. Now, we pulled the trigger a little bit early, as they say. We gave you guys a week's heads up so that you can take advantage of it in case you wanted to. We know that everybody gets a little bit busy around the week around Thanksgiving and on Black Friday, especially in the United States. But in that case, you still got time to take a look at it. Take a look at all the different programs that we offer. If it's going to be enterprise architecture, go ahead, take a look at that. That's a fantastic program. Of course, our world-class cloud architect development program, that's there as well. And then the program that was in conjunction developed with David Linthicum, also a 30-plus veteran when it comes to the AI and cloud and networking space. There's the generative AI program. It's fantastic work. It's fantastic programs that you have the advantage of using so that you can upskill yourselves in that regard. But that in itself, I hope everybody has a fun time today. And Mike, I would say let's go get started and take a look at some of the wonderful questions that people have prepared for us.
Sounds great. Love helping out.
All right, let's take a look at our first question. Okay, from Cloud Doctor. Hi, Mike and Mark. What's the best way to gain practical cloud architecture experience when applying for cloud architecture positions? And how can I stand out as an individual?
So, Cloud Doctor, that's an excellent question. So let's talk about practical experience in cloud architecture. And some of that is knowing the difference between a cloud architect and a cloud engineer. And the reason I'm saying this is the types of things that you do to get practical hands-on experience are very different in engineering roles and architectural roles. So as a general rule, as an architect, you will not be allowed to touch the technology. What that means is you'll be designing systems, you'll be meeting and managing stakeholders, you'll be meeting and managing vendors, you'll be leading teams, you'll be creating architectural repositories, you'll be creating architectural review boards, you'll be analyzing IT systems and infrastructure. There's a reason I'm telling you this, and I'll talk to you what you can do to get things. You'll be designing future state architecture models, you'll be facilitating meetings, you'll be designing IT governance policies and procedures. You're going to be collaborating across the entire organization's key stakeholders to try to get their business requirements. You're going to have to learn about the business, the vision of the business, the goals of the business, and the business architecture. And you're going to have to be able to do that so you can create IT strategies that are going to align with that organization's goals as well as its people and its organizational processes. You're going to be conducting a lot of gap analysis between what the technology is now versus where it needs to go in the future. So the current architecture versus the to-be or future architecture. You're going to be designing plans for systems integration efforts. You're going to be looking to looking about how you can lead IT resource allocation. You'll be leading architectural review boards. You'll be doing cost benefit analysis. And why did I tell you that? Because those are things that we do as architects. By comparison, a cloud engineer would be implementing the systems. They would be building the systems. They would be working with Linux. They would be working with Python. They would be working with DevOps tools. They'd be working with infrastructure as code like Terraform. And that is really so critical. So in one case, if you're going to be writing responses to RFIs, RFPs, and RFQs like we would as architects, that would be a way you could get practical hands-on experience. Find some kind of an RFP that's out there and learn how to create a strategy and respond to that RFI, RFP, RFQ. As architects, we don't write Python scripts at all. But as architects, we're giving constant presentations. The last part of an architect interview is a presentation, for example, just to even get hired. But you'll be giving presentations to the C-suite to get their approval, buy-in, and of course, finances for the architectures you actually want. You'll be giving the presentations to technical teams, and you'll be giving presentations at executive briefings. You'll be giving presentations at conferences. So if you're not an architect and you want to get practical experience, ideally, we'll join an organization like ours where we'll teach you these things, or find an architect that you can follow around day in and day out for a couple of months. Now that's going to be challenging with non-disclosure agreements and legal things, but that would be another way. So one other thing we do as architects is we write a lot of thought leadership documentation. So for example, I might be talking how an AI could actually transform the healthcare industry, and I might be writing a specific document about AI used in radiology. Now, that's another thing that you could do. You could examine and learn expertise about an industry and start to create industry solutions that are reference architectures, not exact architectures for the clients, but architecture patterns that could work in certain industries. Again, that's doing architect things. You can be writing some things on various technology solutions, integration plans. Again, that's architect things. As architects, as architects, you're going to be facilitating meetings. Lots of time. You're going to get 30 people on your architecture team, and you're going to need to keep it moving and keep it efficient and keep it productive. So practice that. So, we provide all these things to our students in our program because this is architecture training. But if you're going to get hands-on experience, it has to be doing what architects actually do. If you're showing me, for example, that you set up a WordPress site and you want to be an architect, I'm going to say, okay, well, that's not your job. Now, how do you build me a business case to show me that when an organization spends $1 billion on technology, show me their return on investment, show me those metrics that you're going to use to sell that to them. So there's that. And honestly, there's a lot of sales in architecture. You're going to have to sell your management when you need resources for your architectural team, and you're going to have to justify their cost based upon the revenue of your architecture. You're going to have to sell your solution to the client because that's going to be part of your job. And you're going to honestly have to sell your management when you want to raise. So getting any kind of sales experience would be good along the way. I mean, obviously we train all these skills to our students, but if you're not with us, maybe get a sales job along the way, at least to learn some sales or do something. And when you start adding up all these skills, then you start to see why it's so hard to find an architect, because the architect still needs good technical knowledge, but not necessarily the hands-on skills. But they still need the knowledge. And let me differentiate between the hands-on knowledge and the actual architectural knowledge you need. Hands-on knowledge is this: setting up an S3 bucket and now setting up a little bit of EBS. That is hands-on knowledge. That will never suffice for the architect. And no matter how many times somebody configures that, they will still not understand architecture. Architectural knowledge is understanding what is block storage. How does it work? Where are the limitations in that storage area and network? Why block storage is used. Block storage has some severe performance limitations compared to direct storage that could be in the server. So how do you work around those block storage limitations? How would you do it in the cloud? How would you do it off of the cloud? Now, when would you use object storage? What are you going to do with the metadata in object storage? How does that metadata integrate into your big data environment? What are your use cases for object storage versus file storage versus block storage? That's architectural knowledge, not how-to knowledge. So how do you stand out? You show the world that you understand what technology can do for business. You show yourself as a strategist. And in most cases, you'll need some training or some coaching along the way to do it, unless you've already been like a management consultant working for McKinsey, Deloitte, or Accenture, because we're basically, as architects, doing that same strategy consulting, but now we're consulting on the technologies and the impact it can make for the business. So I hope that helps. Now, Mark always has a different perspective because we grew up from different places. We had a different career trajectory. So Mark, I'll give that to you as well.
Yeah. So within the confines of how we look at architecture, meaning architecture is something that it's almost like an art, if you want to call it that, an art of where you're designing and where you're leading or supervising generally the construction of something. So you're not the actual person getting your hands dirty, so to speak, when it comes to the construction. So with that in mind, the first aspects that always come to my mind is business. It's going to be very difficult to design and when you get high enough, I know we say cloud and we say networking, but it's all business design to a certain extent, business system designs. When you do that, you have to understand, first of all, some details about the business itself. It could start with you understanding just the general idea, how is a business constructed? And then you go a little bit further into the details of learning how a business is run. And you kind of want to know that because when you start talking to people that are potentially going to be your customers, your clientele, you want to be able to have a mental framework or mind map so that you can understand the language that they're speaking. Because one of the aspects of an architect is to take these business requirements, so it helps you understanding what they mean, and then being able to translate them to the individual departments or people that are going to help you with your job. So communication is a vital aspect of it. But specifically that ability to translate something as complex as a business requirement into another complex system, which could be the technical requirements as well. So from that perspective, I agree with Mike 100%. Technical knowledge is very important, but I would say it's about 10% of really what the architect should be doing in that sense when it comes to their day-to-day role. Now, that doesn't mean that you may not have to spend initially 50 to 60% of your time learning some of the technology, because it's going to be very difficult to be able to impact the business with technology if you have no idea what the technology is about.
Absolutely.
But bar none, and I know you said architecture specifically, I'm going to push this out a little bit also to my engineering friends and those people that are working their way up from the different IT levels. Work on these communication skills because they're the ones that are going to make you stand out. Being able to communicate with people in plain, very easy language. It doesn't matter if this is English, if this is Japanese for you, if this is German, if this is Greek, so forth, but be able to communicate in a simple enough language so that the person that you're speaking to can understand you. And if you do have tech behind you, I never want to say don't have the tech, but just get used to the idea of how you can translate the language of technology into the business language. So, all right, let's take a look at our next question. And it is from 2N Hughes. Hey, Mike, I'm interested in becoming a cloud architect. What are the biggest challenges faced by cloud architects? And do you think there's the same as a few years ago, or will they ever change?
So great question, 2N Hughes. And I'll give you the historical perspective because I've been an architect now for about 25 years and helped design many of the clouds that actually exist. So it's not a world I'm new to. All in all, the challenges then and the challenges now are mostly the same. But there is one subtle challenge that has changed everything. And this is the key to understanding architecture careers and optimizing your future. When I started being an architect 25 years ago, I'm going to say most of the time the tech just didn't work. And the tech was severely limited. So companies would buy a router for $5,000 and it could push 1.5 megabit per second of traffic at peak conditions. Peak conditions. So it's not a lot of bandwidth that we had. The routers could only hold a certain number of routes. The CPUs and the servers only had one core. So even if you put 2 CPUs in a server, you only had 2 cores. And in those days, you had less than a megabyte of RAM. in a 15 or 20 or $30,000 server, maybe 2 megabytes of RAM. So the resources were constrained. So when the resources were constrained, what we needed in technology were some of the best and brightest people you will ever see. People that knew how to take big problems and shrink them to work in like nothing. So if you speak to some of those network architects out there, like a Russ White from Cisco or anybody that's got a CCIE number of less than 10,000, they were dealing with the constraints of stuff that was terrible. So then in those days in our architects, we were more concerned about them being more technical. And we were more concerned about them being more technical because the tech was so broken. You were spending most of your time fixing it. Now, 10 years later from there, and we're still going back into like 2005, 2006, the tech started to get real good. The CPUs started to have more capabilities and more power, especially the server ones. The routers had really fast hardware, ASICs and FPGAs that could move data at incredible speed. The systems became very efficient. Servers started to have lots of DRAM. Virtualization became very common. And many of those old technology challenges just simply melted away. And with that, now companies were more focused on making sure their architectures could drive business transformation. And what happened was a massive failure. And the reason those first architects were so bad at what they did was not because they were bad architects, it's because they were great engineers. And they had gone from engineering into architecture, and they were the best system builders out there, performance tuners, optimizers. They were great. The problem is they were great at the tech, and there was a disconnect between these really awesome tech people and the needs of the business. So now that architect role became a liaison. So now that architect is spending a lot of their time with the C-suite. Now that architect is now spending a lot more time with the vendors and managing them. Now the architect spending more time with their stakeholders. Now the architect is leading a bigger architectural team of people that are going to come in and come out. Now the architects are more focused on making sure the technology matches the business processes. Now the architects are giving more presentation C-suite, and now the architects are more business relevant. And you can see that in what companies are ordering, because 70 to 80% of all cloud architectures, for example, were complete failures. And that's because people lack the business sense to know what they should have moved and not moved. Plus, they also lack the technology fundamentals. So as I've gotten more architects hired over the years, and at this point, my architects are working at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft and Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Citrix, Palo Alto, Zscaler, anywhere. And now they're wanting more business in these architects. They're wanting better presentation skills. They're wanting better sales skills. They're wanting better executive presence. So in the old days, we used to struggle because the tech didn't work. And now the struggle is a lot of the architects out there don't have these fundamental skills. They don't know how to build an architecture team of 50 people. They don't know how to lead and facilitate a meeting. They don't know how to build a business case. They don't know how to go in there and have a discussion with that C-suite. They don't know how to map out the business processes. They don't know how to design the systems end to end. They know how to focus on that one thing that they were in there. So that's the biggest challenges we're having now as architects, is not being able to fire them, not being able to hire them, because what we find are people that were great engineers. But there's a big difference between an engineer and an architect. It's about the same difference as those people that build, design, and even repair the airplane's engine and the person that flies that plane. Those people that design and build those airplane engines and maintain them need to understand that airplane engine a whole lot better than that pilot, because it's their job. And if they don't do it, the plane's going to crash and people die. So they have to be great. That pilot does not need to be an expert on that engine. That pilot needs to know how to fly the plane, how to lead that plane, how to keep people safe along the way, how to deal with bad weather, how to deal with other nature and other things that occur along the way, congestion in the air, and other things related to the survival of the people. So that's the real challenge, is there's almost no architecture skills out there. I mean, we train architecture. David Lithicum trains architecture. There's not many people teaching architecture, because most of us that have been in architecture are still doing it. It's our life's work. We love it, and it pays so well that nobody really wants to retire. I retired a couple of years ago. Actually, I retired when I was 34 and did a lot of consulting on the side. I had a life-changing injury and had to retire. So I retired in my early 30s and started teaching people and getting them hired, which is what I really did which is one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. So if you think about that and if you understand the actual challenges that companies are having, I hope that'll make it easy for you to understand.
Yeah, this is the question that you asked, Toon-Hugh, really encompasses as to why Go Cloud architects or careers actually exists. And one specific reason there is that the way the industry has defined and tried to kind of mishmash the different terms of architecture and what it means in regards to being an architect, you'll notice there's a lot of misguided information and misdefinitions, if I may put it that way. And the challenge I find there is that many people that get into these roles, especially at some cloud providers, they are under the impression that either it's going to be completely tech or it is supposed to be more of a designer type of role. And they get this rude awakening where they find out it really is not either or. It's more of a combination at that. And that's very confusing to people because being able to lead, design, and being able to drive business forward are very separate skill sets compared to somebody who has to have that detailed analytic type of mind to be able to go in there and understand what are coding practices, what is the infrastructure going to be like, and what will be the implementation of that infrastructure, and then the services that go along with it to be able to do these things. Those are two different mindsets that you have. And over time, what you see is this slow shift now is from, okay, we wanted you to be really technical in these aspects, just like Mike mentioned. And now with very little explanation, I think I've seen a couple of articles that once mentioned that some of the cloud providers believe, oh, because of AI, now you need to be less technical. And those are fruitless assumptions or fruitless things that you tell people because it still doesn't give them the reason as to the real shift here is that architecture is not being an engineer. It is somebody that requires a completely different mindset. So when it comes to challenges there, this is for cloud architecture and other ones, is this idea of not having an identity, not knowing really where you are, always feeling like you're teetering, from one side to the other side of the fence. It's like you have to shimmy just to figure out what you got to do. And one of the reasons why we do this weekly, why we have training programs to get people in the right mindset, getting them the right skill sets for these things, because the other challenge that cloud architects are going to have because of this flip-flopping is a lack of skills. The talent gap is ridiculous when it comes to these things because people don't know what they need to focus on.
Right.
Now, we are seeing through not just our efforts, but generally also that finally people are waking up. They're also educating hiring managers and others in regards to what it really means to want to move forward in an architecture role. So we are seeing slowly the division happening there where we see now engineering again, we're seeing actual architecture as well. Now, will this be a rapid change? If I had a crystal ball and I would tell you immediately, I would probably put some money on it too if I was a betting man, which unfortunately I'm not a betting man when it comes to that, but I hope there is a shift sooner rather than later, just because businesses are bleeding because of this misguidance and this confusion. And one of the, go ahead, Mike.
No, I keep finishing. I was just going to add to that when you were done.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of my fears is that eventually because of this, that it's going to take a lot of work to undo the damage that was done in people's perception of what the architect is. You see this already in job descriptions too, where they can't decide what you're supposed to be. They'll ask you to know 6 different coding languages and so forth. So I hope rather sooner than later so that we can undo any damage that is there because of this residual nonsense that was spewed of what the role actually is.
And it is, and you'll see two kinds of companies, and you'll see companies that care about technology, and Apple, Amazon, Cisco, IBM, Google, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, big banks. They have architects in very business-oriented roles, and IBM, those kind of things. You can find people that tech is not part of their strategy. They've got what you call hodgepodge people in there, And they're people that know a little of everything. They know a little bit of how to write a Linux script. They know a little bit of how to write a Python script. They know 2% about the cloud. They know 5% of the network. They know 5% of the security. And those organizations are constantly struggling because no matter how smart that person is that they hired for those roles, they can't possibly be successful because there's too much information for them to know. So they know just surface level about a lot of things. And then you constantly see break and fractures in the systems, and it's again and again. And all this stuff works fine because most of the tech works these days if the design is very simple. Anybody can do that. But once it starts to scale, that's where the fundamentals, and that's where if you miss something along the way, that's where everything breaks. It's always at scale. So hope that helps.
And by the way, just so that everybody knows, to get a really good idea of architecture, tomorrow's webinar that we're going to have, it has fantastic information in trying to actually undo some of these misconceptions that have been out there. And again, we also have the ebook that goes along with it. If you want to prep a little bit, get a better understanding, that is also going to fuel the idea of you being able to pay it forward and being able to explain to other people what architecture and an architect actually does when it comes to facilitate the difference between the business and the technology and how we can combine those two successfully. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next question, please, Taron. And we got a question from Tis a Name. Nowadays, what would be the pathway, assuming from almost zero experience, entry level in IT, but not cloud? So basically, Mike, what would be a good way of people to go from zero to hero, so to say, when it comes to an IT career? Let's say we focus on architecture.
Well, let's not focus on architecture. Let's just, let's carve it. So the first thing to the name is to figure out what you want to be. I need to know exactly what you want to do. And here's the reason. You have a destination that we want to go to. So let's say you were going to go to the airplane. Which plane do you get on? And the plane could be your training program and your experience program. The plane that you get on is the one that takes you to your ultimate destination. That's the first thing we need to know. Because each of these careers has a very different set of skills. I can tell you exactly what you need for an architect, for like a cloud architect, solutions architect, enterprise architect, but that might not be your goal. The next thing is there's no such thing as entry level. Nothing. And here's what I mean by this. You can get any job you want, regardless of your level of experience, if you can do the job, have the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion, you're trustworthy, you can communicate well. And I'll give you examples. An example might be Jordan Kitko, who came to America from Cameroon while he was in college. We got him hired after we got him trained at AWS. His buddy, who was his best friend, also in our training at the same time, got hired by AWS. He was also in charge, Romanik Ivan Tanenba. Richard Ferrari, first tech job at a bank was a solutions architect. Delroy Batt, last job prior to us was on ambulances at the DMT. Left us as a security architect with CDW. Jermaine Houston was selling landscaping gear, left our organization and was hired as an enterprise architect. So the point is, you can get any job you want. What determines what you can actually get is what your skill level is and what your capabilities are. And how we get that first is we need to know where you want to go. If you tell me you want to be a cloud engineer, that is one set of skills. You want to tell me you want to be a cloud architect, it's almost the exact opposite set of skills. And why am I so firm on this? I've interviewed over 6,000 people in my career. 6,000. And if I tell you that out of the 6,000 people that I've interviewed, less than 10 were hireable. And why was that? I interviewed a lot of highly intelligent people, a lot of good people with a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and passion. But what happened was they tried to learn a little of everything. So if I needed a network architect, I needed somebody that understood networking, understood all the interior gateway protocols and their ins and outs and how to optimize them, understood exterior gateway protocols, understood how to tune traffic and make that thing scale, what have you, for the business. I needed that. And what I would get was someone that would know how to do commands, but didn't understand that. I needed someone that really understood networks and could understand and think about the kind of traffic that was going on the network and figure out how they needed to design it. What I got was, I know Linux. When I needed someone that could create a strategy for 20,000 remote locations, they said, I know how to make an Ethernet cable. And these were all good people. They were smart people. It was that they had learned the skills that were not related to the job they were applying for. They had learned the skills related to another job. So you can get any job you want. I just want to know what job it is, because we got to build you the right roadmap, because 90% of the people learn the wrong things. And quite frankly, I learned the wrong things. I went and spent a boatload on certifications in the beginning of my career. I took a 5-day, $5,000 Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer boot camp, did a CCNA, took an $11,000 CCNP boot camp, did a CCDA, did a CCDP, sent out my resume, and nobody cared. And then I spoke to 50 recruiters, and they told me exactly what hiring managers wanted. And I asked them in a senior network engineer position. I wrote that list down. I learned all those things they told me, went on my first interview, and was hired as a senior engineer for MCI WorldCom, which at the time was the world's largest ISP. And I was in the most strategic division, and I was the most senior engineer there, which was really scary because it had been my first job, and I didn't even know what I didn't know yet. But that's the point. You can get anything you want. It's the quality of your preparation.
Also, just so that you notice, in case you don't know, let's say you're trying to reverse engineer positions to try to get an understanding of what type of skill sets you need to pick up, so that you can also then figure out what type of training you're going to need. If you don't know exactly what you want to go for, I look at IT almost like a buffet that you have to go into. You may have to get up, you may have to try one thing and the other thing, get a taste for it a little bit. Yeah. Because what you'll notice is there's people with different affinities to things. There's people that are going to be a little bit more outgoing. They enjoy the ability to speak to people. This might also be their own personal learning style, where they like to talk about these things. A role like that may lend yourself to be more down the architecture road, or maybe one of the sales engineer, architecture, maybe technical sales, something like that goes down this road. But you might find yourself, as some people, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I actually started my career a little bit in coding like that, in programming. But you might be fascinated by being able to manipulate lines and characters and numbers on a page and have them execute and do something fantastic that's going to bring value to a business. So you may have to taste a little bit here and there, try to figure out what you like. But once you have a little taste of something that you like, that's where you go back to your reverse engineering aspects of these things, and you take a look at the different skill sets that I needed. And you kind of start planning out the way that you're going to train for these things. Now, because we don't know the details, I can't specifically tell you, go for perhaps structured learning with a certification here or that certification. If you said it was security, me and Mike, we do have our preference when it comes to security because of the extra service that we've seen out in the field that actually make a difference when it comes to your earning potential and the brand recognition that come with them. But since we don't have any of that information, take a little time, taste a little bit, reverse engineer, and you're always welcome to come back here. Let's say maybe this can be your homework for the week. Try to figure it out, come back next week, pose us a few more questions, give us a little bit more detail, and then we'll be able to guide you a little bit further down the track. If it is something already that you're kind of leaning towards the architecture, we have plenty of information on the YouTube channel that you can take a look. Of course, we have the webinars on Thursdays that kind of dissect the role itself of architecture. And we have a lot of freebies in the description box as well that can kind of give you an idea of what the role is like, and many other types of roles as well that are depicted in there. So the important thing is, don't give up. Find something that you believe that you will enjoy, and then start working on a plan to be able to gain that type of objective. All right, Tyrone, let us move on to our next question. And this is from Cloud Doctor. They say, thank you. You focused a lot on business. However, job descriptions mention coding skills too. How much of this is involved in the cloud architecture role?
Great question there, cloud architecture. So we've got two things to talk about. One is the irrelevance of most cloud architect job descriptions, and the other is what a cloud architect does. There is absolutely zero coding in the cloud architect role. There is zero coding in the enterprise architect role. As a rule, unless you're an application architect working as a solution architect, there's zero coding in those roles. There is no hands-on anything. Now, Cloud Doctor, I actually had a video, and Tyrone or Chris, whoever's back there today, Can you add the link to the video that I did with Christina Marino? She's the CEO of IT Excel, which is a national recruiting firm, and she's been in business for close to 30 years. She's incredible. And she talks about why employers put wacky stuff in job descriptions that are totally unrelated to the job, like coding. And they use it as a catch-all, but that's something else that we'll talk about. So there is no hands-on. So what you won't play with is code. What you won't do is configure. What you won't do is anything. In fact, these job descriptions were so wacky that my buddies and I, do you know what we used to do? A couple times per year, especially during COVID, we actually would get together. We would drink some Macallan 25 on, it was WebEx. Sorry, I actually use Zoom these days, but I'm from Cisco, and we were all Cisco architects that were giggling about it. That were friends from ex-Cisco and other things, and we'd look at it. So as it turned out, Gartner actually asked the CIOs, "What do you want in a cloud architect?" And they said they would like someone that can lead the cultural change for cloud adoption. And that's where I talk about stakeholder management. You always hear me talking about this. They say developing and coordinating a cloud architecture. And that's everything from speaking to the executives to find the goals of their business and the vision for their business, to understanding their business processes, to building an architecture team to baseline that client's technology and leveraging that architecture team to design the architecture, document the architecture, and those types of things before it goes to another team to build it. But, that's not the architect side. And then they say they'd like the architect to develop the cloud strategy and coordinate the adoption process. Well, absolutely. Do we go single cloud, hybrid, multi-cloud, which is what 90% of organizations are doing now, hybrid, multi-cloud. What do we put in what clouds? How do we increase our availability across clouds? Do we do a massive migration? Do we need intermediate architectures along the way, or a single architecture? Do we move it as a lift and shift? Do we refactor? Do we tune? So all that is what we do as architects. Now, they also said, hey, what else would you like your architects to do every day? And they said, helping to find talent with the necessary skills. And I told you I've interviewed 6,000 technology professionals for architecture roles. That's the reason why. Always trying to hire them. Assessing application, software, and hardware. Sure, I bring in a team of people and they help me do that. Creating that cloud broker team, well, that's that architecture team I'm talking about. Establishing best practices for cloud across the company. That's like saying every new demilitarized zone that will have remote access will be set up with these 2 layers of next generation firewalls. We'll have this kind of policy. We'll have this hardened operating system. So that's what we're talking about there. It's a standard. And then it said select cloud providers and vet third-party services. So the average enterprise has about 100 or 200 vendors. They have 200 to 1,000 applications. They typically have about 100,000 IP addresses and 5,000 locations and a good 10,000 routes in the local routing table. So those kind of things, definitely how can I overlook and manage those vendors, which is what you hear me talking about. Overseeing governance and mitigating risk. So we will have to craft governance structures by working with key stakeholders to get their buy-in, to help promote their architecture to the people, to get the people to actually adopt it. We will work with those architectures to make sure that when one person makes a change, it won't impact another business unit inside of this building. We will build a governance for the people that are going to govern the implementation, because we're not going to be there to do it as architects. We'll be off with a new client. We will, they also, so CIO Magazine says we would like our architects to help manage budgets and estimate cost. Absolutely. And I'm going to expand upon this. Building a business case and an ROI model, definitely. And then it says operate at scale. So what are those things needed to operate at scale? How many people does that organization need to hire? What qualifications do the people that organization needs to hire? Where are the gaps in the systems? Where are the weaknesses in their systems? And which one should be prioritized based upon the organization's limited financial resources? This is architecture. So if you get an architect job, you'll not be allowed to touch your technology. In fact, I will tell you, 25 years ago, in my first solutions architect job, the customer had a BGP outage, and I just happened to be on site, and I was a BGP expert, and I went to that router, and the customer was so thankful. They called my manager and told him what a great guy I was for fixing their network on the spot. My manager said, thank you so much. I'll pass on the message. He pulled me in his office and he said, if you touch your test service technology next, that's the last day you'll work with us. And I said, huh? He said, we have post-sales implementation people and tech support people to fix it. You are here for business. You are here for strategy, not to touch the tech. Don't ever do it again. It was even worse because while I was touching the technology, I missed a thing going on in the business that day because I was focused on the tech, which is what my manager knew. But I learned never again, and that was 25 years ago, to think about touching the technology as an architect. And if you ask David Lithicum, who's been a cloud architect for about 30 years too, he's Deloitte's chief cloud architect. So you can imagine how many people he's hired and trained as well. He'll tell me the last time he touched the technology was when I left engineering 30 years ago. Last time I touched the technology was 25 years ago after I left engineering and moved into an architecture role. No touch, no touch.
There's nothing else I can add to that because, let me rephrase. I can add stuff to it, but this conversation is always one of those that Mike and I had to go for hours because because of our frustration sometimes that we see with how people put job descriptions together. We're going to touch a little bit later on it, or at least I will, for another question that we have. But one aspect of when it comes to job descriptions that's very crucial is being able to attempt to translate what the job descriptions are really saying. And there's a few things that you will have to do yourself to be able to do so. But we'll touch on that a little bit more in a different question because it's a little bit more relevant to that one. So in that case, let's move on to the next question, please, Tyrone. So from Dia, of the 4 architects, which one is more business orientated? Is it suitable for someone with a strong financial background? Because I want to be a solutions architect.
Okay,
so,
Dia.
Go ahead, Mike. No, I was just going to say, we don't know exactly which 4 architects types, I would suppose so, but I'll let you take a stab at it, Mike, while I ask the question.
So, Dia, I'll kind of go over this, and I'll go over I'll give you 4 kinds of architects. Now, the first kind of an architect isn't an architect at all. It's called a technical architect. And a technical architect is a very senior engineer. And they are a great engineer. And they're so good, but they're not really that super customer-facing cloud architect, solutions architect, enterprise architect. But they're so good, and you don't know what to do with them. So you call them a technical architect, and it gives you the ability to pay them more. That's just a superstar engineer. Now, the next phase up, Dia, and I'm going to show you, is the solutions architect. Now, the solutions architect is going to be the lowest paying, least strategic, least business of all the architect roles, and it's still going to be business oriented. The next level up is going to be the cloud architect, and I'm going to show you the difference in a visual that I'm going to show you in a minute. Is going to be one level up on business compared to the solutions architect, and it's typically going to pay more. And as we move up further, we start getting into the enterprise architect, which is all about business. So here's a graphic that I actually put together very recently. Let me share this graphic, and I want to walk you through, and I want you to see the subtle differences in these roads. Now, if you train to be a cloud architect, you'll easily get a solutions architect job. If you train to be a solutions architect, you will struggle multi-cloud. And the main difference between the solutions architect and the cloud architect, before I go into the subtleties here, is if you work for Cisco and you design, present, and sell a Cisco solution, you are a Cisco solutions architect. If you work for Deloitte and you design, present, and sell an end-to-end networking solution for an enterprise, you are a network architect. If you design, present, and sell only AWS stuff, you are a solutions architect. If you design, present, and sell the end-to-end private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, you are a cloud architect. Now, before you say you want to be a solutions architect, I want you to understand there's only 3 companies you can work for as solutions architect in cloud computing: AWS, Microsoft, and Google, for the most part, or Cloudflare, because they're the only people that need solutions architects. 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. 98%. And they don't need solutions architects. They need people that understand all of the cloud. So if you choose the solutions architect, it is fine. I want you to understand it's the lowest paid, it's the least business oriented, and it's honestly the least needed of all these roles because 98% of the world is multi-cloud. But it's still a great role, and I've trained many solutions architects. I had the solutions architect role. The first architect role I got was a principal solutions architect. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it, and it's great. So, Tyrone, can you share my PowerPoint slide? So here's what I want you to see in this slide. If we look at the bottom of these 3 architects, you see the cloud solutions architect. And it's a great job. I love this job. I had fun with this job. But look at what we're dealing with as we move up. That the architect were working on scalable and secure architecture. Good. So was the cloud architect. We're participating in pre-sales meetings because most solutions architect roles are for the cloud vendors themselves, where you're selling that solution. We're dealing with analyzing existing infrastructure and project requirements, just like all architects. We're looking for ways to optimize costs and implement cost savings. Now, note what I said, optimize costs. This is economics. This is accounting. As we move up into the more strategic architecture roles, it's less about cost optimization and it's more about obtaining value. So if you buy something for $1 and you get nothing in return, it's expensive. But if you buy something for $1,000 but get $5,000 back, it was the cheapest investment in the world, that kind of thing. So as architects, as we move up, that's where going to be our focus. The solution architect might be designing disaster recovery policies. It might be developing migration strategies for moving things from the data center to the cloud. It'll maintain cloud architecture documentation and lead proof of concept. Again, this is a good role, and for many students, this is their first role. Balwinder Kerr, for example, was a stay-at-home mom before she got this. Al Legister was a sales rep before we trained him and got him hired as a senior solutions architect as his first tech job at Deloitte. Lenny Burnett was our video editor who got hired by Citrix as a solutions architect. Love the solutions architect role. Often this is people's first tech job. Now, as we move into this cloud architect role, look what happens. It becomes more business oriented, and here's the reason why, because now we have to design private clouds, which are often the cheapest and highest performance, hybrid clouds, which are typically the most efficient, multi-cloud and hybrid multi-cloud architectures, which are going to be the most agile. So we're designing that. Now, because we're dealing with all these clouds, we're dealing with more technology platforms, and now we're leading bigger teams. We're going to be leading larger AI architecture teams, and we'll need compute people with us, storage people, AI people with us, networking people, security people. We're going to be leading pretty big teams here. Now, here we're going to be more focused on establishing cloud governance frameworks across the clouds. Now we're going to be designing higher availability solutions because it's hard. A single cloud is a single point of failure, no matter how many availability zones and regions you use. So now we're going to get into that high availability space, which means we get much more involved into change management. Now we're more about developing cloud adoption and migration strategies. We're going to look at optimization of cost, optimization of resources, much more evaluation and selection of third parties, a lot more vendor management here, and we're getting into more stakeholder management. Then as we move up, and I train all these architects, I train solutions architects in a cloud architect program, and I do it because that way I can train people for the better role. And if they get the solutions architect job as their first job, I still figure it's a win for them, especially because it pays fairly well. And now once we get into the enterprise architect role, now look how things change dramatically. Now we're more about creating technology roadmaps that are aligned with business objectives. Now we're looking for areas of improvement, either in the IT processes, the IT systems, or the business processes themselves. Now we're more about analyzing, mitigating IT risk and creating impact analysis of various technology and various economic forces on our business and what we could do with technology to solve these problems. Now we're more about designing for scalability and agility and flexibility to allow these businesses to be more dynamic. Now we're creating architectural review boards and creating architectural standards and best practices across the organization. Now we're looking at where they are and where they need to go in the future. So now we're getting more about governance. So as you can see, it goes up. Now, here's what you also might want to see. The more tech we are, sadly, and this is really sad to me because I love really hardcore tech people and I love the engineers. You start noticing if you look on this continuum, the more people do the work, the lower they get paid. And it's not my choice. And you can see, that DevOps salary, engineer salary, that cloud engineer salary. And as you start getting into the cloud architect, you notice the average pay is about 201. And you move into the enterprise architect and the average pay is 202. And mind you, there's plenty of $500,000 architects. And when you marry business acumen with tech skills, which is why we do so much of it, look where it tends to take you. And it can take you as an architect. And the difference here with these architects is they become executives. They have their business acumen. So if you look at someone with a lot of business acumen in tech, you typically think senior director or above. So senior director at Cisco earns about $530 a year. Senior director at Palo Alto about $440 a year. But if you look at it at the same time, notice that a principal architect at AWS is about $372. The pay range is about $300 to $495. You look at a principal architect at Google in the $508,000 pay range on average. These are Glassdoor numbers with a pay range of what do they call it? It's I think it was $399 to $677. You start going into Microsoft, it pays a little bit more than AWS, typically speaking. You're seeing the same thing. So why am I showing that? I'm trying to show that trend where the closer you get away from the business, the closer you get to being seen by the business, being seen more strategic, the more the earnings are. So they're all good. For my people that come from MBA backgrounds and finance backgrounds, I love to put them in my enterprise architect program because I train them as enterprise architects and cloud architects in the same space so they can do either job. And I give them the differences in the subtle training. So they've got the tech and the business down pat. So that's their best. So I like that. That's my favorite place. And that's my favorite of all the roles. But I had fun at all my principal solutions architect jobs. They were awesome. I had fun at my more platformy kind of architect job, like that network architect or the cloud architect. I had fun at my business architect jobs. I just love being an architect. And I highly encourage the career.
Yeah. And Dia, let this not dissuade you from moving towards solution architect. What you saw there is a solution architect was $300,000 and change, right? They're getting it. The important part there to realize is that titles are just titles. What you really want to focus on is pick a job, irregardless of what the title is, and dissect the actual description of what they're asking for. Because what you might notice is, and you might notice this in an example, let's say you want to go for to be an enterprise architect. You might start reading through the role, and all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, Mike said that enterprise architecture deals with the entire scope of the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more focused on objectives compared to goals. But I keep reading here that they're asking me to work on goals that are tied to specific business divisions or units. And they keep talking about functions that I'm supposed to help and be more efficient and optimize the functions and the processes of a particular group. Now, if you read something like that, for example, you might be looking at something we call to be a business architect. It's somewhat of a subset if you want to think of an enterprise architect, because you're going to be dealing more specifically with a particular unit or department and within that company, and then you're working on optimizing the business there. But these are generally going to be handed down from the enterprise architect because they're going to have the entire view of the enterprise. So all I want you to do with that is make sure you read the job description, ask the questions. You might be able to nab something like a solution architect role, where it's not really what you're used to being a solution architect role, where you're just sitting there and you're just working on one particular solution. But it could be something that's more grandiose that can get you to your goals of whichever type of architect you want to be. So that's also key in there.
And that's the key. And the problem is you can't really look at the job description. So what you're ultimately going to have to do, and this is the saddest thing. So I don't apply for jobs. I'm going to make that very clear. I work with a network of executive recruiters. I teach my students how to get these right recruiters. I call someone like that Christina Marino, who I actually posted a video of her. I tell her I'm looking for something, and she comes back to me, and she's already spoken to various C-suite executives, and they're ready to meet me for an interview. And then after I interview, they say, I'm going to hire you. Then I fill out an application. I get hired. And then I get auto rejected 9 months later from HR saying I don't meet the things after I've already been promoted. So I don't really want that. So I don't really. So the problem is, how do you do it? Well, what you can do sometimes when you see job descriptions that look weird is you can look at what people's LinkedIn profiles that have the same job site and see what they're doing in their profiles. Because that way you'll get something. And you got to look at a random enough sample. The other thing that I'll tell you is if you're working with a recruiter like I am, if I call Christina Marino from ITXL, and honestly, that's the best recruiter I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of good ones, but there's a lot of good ones. But what if I call Christina from ITXL and say, you sent me this job description. It's got 5 different careers in it. What's the hiring manager looking for? She'll call that hiring manager and the hiring manager will say, I don't want any of that. I want smart, I want fungible, and I want someone that knows these 5 things. And that you have to do that. So you're going to have to do reconnaissance wherever you go. Have to. Because in an engineering role, the job description somewhat makes sense. Somewhat, but not really. In an architecture role, they never make sense. So I kind of hope that gives some guidance there.
All right, let's go on to our next question, please. And this is from Sans Francois. They're asking about leadership coaching. Are the classes live? Do you participate? Do participants learn from you directly? For example, yourself, Mike?
So let's talk about the leadership classes we have. In our executive programs, in our enterprise architect programs, in our tech leadership programs, and our tech interview master program, we have a lot of leadership training. And it is recorded content plus live. There's always a live element. Now, who teaches the live executive training programs? I teach the majority of them. I'd say about 75% or 80. But we might have David Lithicum, who was Deloitte's chief cloud strategist, who's also a CTO and a CEO in his life, come and teach some. Sometimes I have Drs. Cooper Johnson and Drs. Jamie Long. Jamie Long is I think she's the dean of the business school where she works, or the department head. Cooper Johnson used to be the department head of that unit or another business school. They are rock stars, and they periodically come in. And occasionally I'll have other executives periodically come in that have big executive positions. But 80% of it's me. I mean, my heart is in training people, but for me, and I've trained people to pass the CCI exam, to pass any exam out there. I've gotten people hired for 20 years. But what I love is the leadership piece. And here's why. You give me a good CCIE network engineer that's really strong, that's got a $130,000 job, and you take that person, you give them some business executive and leadership skills, and their next job's $300,000. And it's like, whoa, what just happened overnight? When you have someone that's deep, especially on the tech background, because I've always felt like engineers get worked too hard and compensated not sufficiently enough. And when you take that expertise and you add that business acumen, so me, that's kind of like, watering flowers and watching them bloom. So I do about 80% of those classes. I'm usually joined by our chief operating officer on a lot of them as well, Christopher Johnson, and he adds a lot too.
All right, let's take a look at our next question here. From Mr. Dominic, 123. How can we know what type of architect a company is looking for when the term architect is so overloaded?
So that's a good question. So I can pretty much tell you this. If it's a Fortune 500 company, which are predominantly the companies that hire architects, it's a real architect job, meaning designing, facilitating meetings, leading large groups. If it's one of those, chances are you're not touching the technology. If it's at any company that has technology at the heart of its strategy, you won't be touching the technology. So there are some companies that are very tech-oriented based. Like a Hulu would be a tech-oriented based kind of company, even if it's a subsidiary. Uber would be a tech-oriented kind of company. So there's a whole lot of companies that are all tech-enabled. You'll be doing architecture at all of them. So realistically speaking, the only time you'll ever get to touch the technology in an architect role, if it's at a very small business that doesn't really have any need for an architect, and because they're a company of less than 100 people and they sort of have a little tech, their idea of an architect is the Linux person, the network person, the Python person, what have you. And these roles pay very little. So as a rule, if it pays above 150 and 90 and all the good architect jobs do, you're not going to be touching the technology, you're going to be advising. If it pays 120 or less, chances are it's an engineering role, at least in the US. So I kind of hope that kind of makes some sense. The higher the pay, the less likely you'll be able to do it. The bigger the company, the less likely you'll be touching the technology. If technology is a strategy. But if it's a small business, and the small business is the kind of thing that I would talk about, like in my village in Greece, they have an American supermarket, and there's like 10 people working at it, like 2 shifts during the day, because the first shift is when we Greek people work before noon, and then we go take a nap and don't go back to work, and then a couple other people come in for a couple hours in the afternoon. So I kind of hope that makes sense. So but if it's, and there you would be a hands-on architect, but for a big business, strategic business, you won't be able to touch the tech.
And while job descriptions are not the best way to go about this in any which way or form, even though I tell you always read the job description, because you might get sometimes some hints. Because if they're asking you to get a Terraform, a Python, it's not going to be an architecture role, right? So you want to use some of your detective skills in trying to figure out what a company might be asking for. I've also found very good success in just spending a few minutes researching the company, idea where they're placing the importance on, especially when they're advertising to potential customers. That can also give you an idea if this company is more focused on the technology aspect of their business or the business aspects of the enterprise itself. Just a couple of nitpicks there. And Mike, before we go on to the next 2 questions, it looks like from Dia that was asking in regards to the 4 different architect types, it does look like they want to focus more on the business aspects and strategy. They're also interested in project management. What I would tell you here, Dia, join us tomorrow. And I mean necessarily not as a shameless plug, as they would say, but because we're going to break down the actual role of the architects and do a little bit more of a comparison than the little taste that you got today in regards to that. And perhaps that will give you a better understanding as well in regards to what's included in the role itself. You'll notice that project management is not a big skill set when it comes to actual architecture. Will it hurt you if you have it? Not necessarily, but it's not something that you should probably go out of your way of learning just so you become an architect. So be sure to join us then tomorrow, and we'll dissect a little bit more the role for you to give you some clarity in regards to potential roles that you can go after when it comes to architecture.
Yeah, let's do this. I want to take 1 question out of order, and it's the top one from Dia. And I want to do it because if nobody hears anything else, this is really important. So bring up the question after the training, because there's 2 things. It's really that causes most people to be harmful. And the question Dia popped in is, after the training, how does one get past the 5 years experience requirement and the recruiter might require? So 2 things. First, Dia, you are in our training program until you are hired if you were to train with us. And that way, I know that the only way you won't get hired for the most part is if you don't finish the work. Or you can't learn it for some reason, because we've been so successful at getting people hired at so many places. Now, let's talk about 5 years experience. Did you know that I want 5 years experience for a secretary? I want 5 years experience for a receptionist at the front desk. I would like 5 years experience for the maid that I hire. I want 5 years experience for the babysitter that I hire for my child. I want 5 years experience for everything. Experience doesn't matter. And to the hiring manager, it doesn't matter in most cases. The hiring manager cares about competency. And Dia, what you'll see, and this is what throws people off, someone will go on an interview. They were interviewed, and then the hiring manager can't hire them, and they say, come back when you have more experience. Let me tell you what that means. It means the person couldn't do the job. Because if I'm willing to interview you, or a hiring manager is willing to interview you or someone, it is pretty important that we were willing to hire you in the first place. So I kind of hope those 2 things. And if I can't hire you for some reason. Now, experience is meaningless. Your ability to do the job and your ability to do the job well is all that matters. So which would you, and I can have 2 doctors, and I used to practice internal medicine in my youth. Dr. 1's been a physician for 50 years. That doctor has been killing patients for the last 50 years, and guess what they are with 50 years experience? They're the same assassin, not doctor, they were in their entire career because they were a horrible doctor. They were incompetent. But they've got 50 years experience. Another person can be fresh out of school or even in school that's a good healer. I can have someone with 25 years experience and a PhD that designs an architecture that a 14-year-old with no experience and certifications bypasses. I hire that 14-year-old because they're much smarter. So there's that. It's never experience. I had no experience when I got my first tech job at MCI WorldCom when they wanted 10 years experience. I will tell you that people get hired every day without experience. I have people come to my students and just try to interview them because they're part of Go Cloud Careers. And if you know how to build the right brand, which we'll teach you, and that's why I've got a marketing executive with 30 years marketing experience working on branding. If you know how to create the right brand, if you know how to create the right content, people will come to you to interview you. I will also have you call recruiters and teach you how to build recruiters. It doesn't matter. The only way these 5 years matter is if you apply for a job, because the person reading them doesn't know how to assess you, doesn't know how to assess your competency, and they're a rubber red stamp. Jennifer Emo was a mental health tech, but guess what? Her first tech job was at JP Morgan Chase after our training as a solution architect. Daniel Bosu was a 20-year-old kid. I always said he was the kind of kid I actually wish was my son because he was so smart. He actually dropped out of high school and never got a GED, and JP Morgan Chase hired him as a solutions architect after our training. Why? Because they were lucky to hire him because he was good. That's the secret, is he was good. So at the same time, Jeffrey West was doing geology work, and we trained him, and he got his first solutions architect job at Cayley. And of course they wanted 5 years, but he was good. Who cares? Richard Ferrari, again, good. Who cares? So MUFG Bank hired him. When I think of Noah Parker, who was a social worker, he still got hired because he was good. Vladimir was a 24-year-old kid, college student, hired by North Highland as an architect. Wallace Agana was a sales rep who got hired by JP Morgan Chase. Pierre Dussault was in Canada. He was operating sailboats, and he got hired as a solutions architect at LeaseWeb. Debbie Griffin had 18 million certifications, and then we trained her for a few months, and she got hired at, I think it was Credera in England. It doesn't matter your background. There is a shortage of people. If I interview 1,000 AWS certified people, and I'm not joking, and I ask them to describe cloud computing, 99% cannot. If I ask them to describe what the cloud is, 99% cannot. They can click on a lot of boxes, and they know how to do a lot of labs, but they don't have the knowledge necessary for me to hire them. So don't worry about it. Whether you train with us, whether you're doing your own training, if you are great, there is always a demand for all of you. So don't worry about experience. First job was senior. In fact, my first job, they wanted 10 years experience. My next job was a lead architect. They wanted 15. And right after that, I was a principal architect, which had a minimum of 15 years plus, and I had a year. It doesn't matter. Go build your dream. No obstacles. Just find what you love and run towards it.
All right. Sorry about that. Let's hope that audio is not as choppy as what was before, unless I need to take some more drastic actions. But let's take a look at the next question. And if something happens, you guys let me know if the video and the audio is bad or not. So from Roy Morales, who do we discuss with for potential career path into cloud or solutions, security or enterprise architect role to choose the best program?
So tomorrow we're going to have a live webinar, Roy. And on this live webinar, I'm going to talk about most likely the cloud architect role, but I will answer questions on security architect roles, and I've got lots of security architects hired. I will answer questions on the enterprise architect role, and we have a program, and then you can figure that. I have to tell you, the enterprise architect program we have is probably one of the best deals out there. And the reason is the way we do it. And I'll tell you why I love all of our programs, and all of them have worked. But what's so special about our enterprise architect program is this. Normally, enterprise architects are so business oriented that they often don't know the technology well enough to be effective. They're typically your MBA, they look like your management consultant, and that's typically what you see. And they're a little gapping on technology. Most cloud architects, and we have got lots of business acumen in our cloud architect program, are good on the tech and a little weak on the business. So we flesh that out. What we do in our enterprise architect program is we take our cloud architect program, which has all the good leadership and all the good cloud and all the good private, hybrid, multi-cloud, deep security, including the CISSP, and then some. And it's all in there. And TOGAF 10, which is all in there. And then we marry extra leadership and extra business process reengineering things in that enterprise architect. And that way we're training both. So the reason I say it's one of the best deals is we have a lot of excellent leadership training in that enterprise program, which would normally be pretty expensive, that we bundled in there to make people great at that role. But you can ask me, you can book a call with a member of the team, and my team will pop a link for that as well. Hope I answered that question.
Okay, let's take a look at our next question. And this one is going to be from Tessa Name, and it looks like it's going to be a two-parter here. So the question is basic understanding. It seems like small businesses are vulnerable to random spikes in charges and denial of wallet attacks. I feel Cloud's pay-as-you-go model doesn't let you stop that alerts and alarms are too late. Is Cloud not suitable for small businesses in this case? Tis name, I want to say it was about 2 weeks ago, we had a Heads in a Cloud where we specifically discussed the need for security, especially in small businesses, because small businesses were being more targeted by attackers when it comes to these kind of things. One of the biggest issues we've seen there is that small businesses have not taken security very seriously in the beginning. And now as attacks have gained more notoriety within that type of small business space, there is still this lack of actual implementation of security protocols. So what you're really describing here is not necessarily that the cloud is a bad model for them. It could be very good. When it comes to anything payment related, most people kind of have a challenge with that. They struggle a bit in the cloud and trying to figure out exactly what they should and shouldn't keep up. But when it comes to what you describe with being attacked with these denial of wallet attacks, what this really is a problem of is a lack of understanding the security measures that should be implemented on the small business sides, because the cloud is going to be a shared responsibility model. So the cloud providers are going to do everything in their power to reasonably secure their infrastructure and their services. They will even provide you with what they consider within their platform best practices on how to secure particular services that they offer. It is still the responsibility from the customer to implement and do their due diligence when it comes to what security measures they should have in being able to avoid or potentially completely mitigate some vulnerabilities that they might have. So again, these vulnerabilities are not there because of a particular service, but because generally speaking, the clientele that uses that service is, well, I don't want to say that they're ignorant of the fact, but let's say they're probably less informed in regards to how they should be approaching security when it comes to specific services.
Yeah, and test the name, I would actually argue the exact opposite of the question you're asking. I would say that in many cases, cloud is not suitable for very large businesses, at least the public cloud by itself. And in small businesses, the private cloud would benefit substantially from cloud computing. And here's the reason why. If we're talking about enterprise-grade computing, let's say we have 1,000 of these individual servers, 1,000 brand new servers that have 6 terabytes of DRAM and 2 of these AMD 192 core EPYC CPUs. And some fast NVMe RAID array sitting in the server. That server is going to cost me about 300 grand. Now, if I were to use that on demand in a cloud provider like AWS, it's going to cost me $6 million for that $300,000 server over the course of 4 years. Now, if I have 1,000 of those things in that big business, now we're talking about a huge discount to not be on that cloud. Now, if I'm going to do that, it means I need to manage my own network. It needs, to manage more of my security. And if I'm doing that for 1,000 servers, and if I'm doing that for 5 petabytes of data, I can save billions of dollars a year as an enterprise, not being on the cloud, if I'm big and global like that. And that's why at one point a year ago, JP Morgan Chase was saying it saved $2.2 billion a year by not leveraging the public cloud based upon their IT spending. Now, of course, AI came in and they jumped into the cloud because they could do it better. Well, they could do it more in a more agile manner and because the capacity was there. Now, a small business does not have the ability to hire a $300,000 network architect like you would need to do it, and you'd need multiple ones to design your own data center. A small business can't afford a $300,000 security architect. A small business can't afford any of these things. So in the case to pay 2 to 3 times more for the technology to run it in the cloud than the technology would be to do it yourself, it might be much cheaper for the small business in the cloud. And the reason is a big enterprise is going to make custom applications. And it's going to be cheaper for them and they're going to be more functional. A small organization could take some of those pre-made things that already exist in the cloud and use them as a good enough. Kind of like going to McDonald's versus going to Martin's. And in that manner, the small business often can get much better services than they could if they could do it on their own. And they can compete more effectively. I can tell you for our organization, we have a 10-server OpenStack cloud. And I bought those servers for $1,000 each from Amazon. And it was going to cost me $11,000 a month to run the cloud in AWS, or $11,000 one time to run it in my house for my students, my student lab. So it was, well, okay, $400,000, $10,000, it's silly easy. But here's the thing. I'm a CCIE. I already had a whole lot of Cisco networking gear sitting in the house, which I didn't have to buy. If I was too overwhelmed, I could ask Mark, who's a CCIE. And I trained a whole bunch of other people that are working at Cisco and other tech companies that if I was ever too busy and it broke, I'd call somebody and they could fix it for me. So for me, I didn't need that. But, you know, maybe an extra $10,000 a month might make sense for a business if they didn't need to spend $25,000 a month for a CCIE and another $20,000 a month for a good security person. So you see how it depends on the size of the business. Small businesses generally benefit the most from cloud computing. Big businesses typically benefit the least, but cloud computing is more based upon what the goals are. Need more speed and agility? Go to the cloud. Need more cost effectiveness? Need higher performance? Need higher security? Do it in the private cloud, the OpenStack cloud, the Nutanix cloud. And if you're a cloud architect, you know them all anyways. It doesn't matter if they're going to or for the cloud, there's still work for you.
All right, let's take a look at our next question. And it is from Tissanima. It says, I was looking at the career path diagram from a junior developer to hire, and I saw solutions architect. Is that the same as a cloud solutions architect?
So yes and no. So here's what a solutions architect is. First, it's a made-up term. And why do I say it's a made-up term? If you work at a phone company, they could call you a solutions architect. I've seen people work at a paint company that pick out a paint color for your house, and they're also called a solutions architect. So the solutions architect term is almost meaningless. Now, what a solutions architect means in the context of tech careers is someone that works for a single company and designs, presents, and sells whatever that single company does. So a Dell solutions architect might be designing, presenting, and selling a storage solution. A Cisco solutions architect would be designing and presenting some Cisco solution. An IBM solutions architect would be designing some type of an IBM solution, a mainframe solution, and who knows what it would be, but something that's specific to IBM. So a cloud solutions architect is a solutions architect specific to the cloud, which means realistically speaking, they're working at Amazon, Microsoft, or Google, or Oracle, or Cloudflare, Alibaba's cloud, Dell's cloud, or somebody else's cloud. Because for the most part, most organizations use multi-cloud, 98% of enterprises. So I kind of hope that helps. But I would caution you to think that there's a natural path from a developer to an architect. It is a very different career. They are both very good careers, but they are completely different. And it's not going to be something that you're going to go from a junior developer to a senior developer to a DevOps engineer and just naturally know how to be an architect. In fact, most likely you will still never learn how to be an architect following that path. And here's the reason why. You'll become a great developer and then you'll become a great DevOps engineer. Unfortunately, you learn how to be a good architect by being trained how to be a good architect and practicing and by working as a good architect. Kind of the same way that if you wanted to go to be a physician, you're going to learn how to be a physician by going to medical school, not studying to be a nurse. They're both very important roles. In one case, the doctor builds the plan and the nurse carries out the plan. And you need to know a lot to carry out the plan, but it's much more focused on what you're doing when you're carrying out the plan than when you're focused on the big picture when you're designing. I hope that helps.
Okay, let's move on to our next question here. And this is from San Francis. They're wondering, when does the next cohort start? Francis, we actually don't have particular schedules where we put people into groups and then have them go through the program. The way the program works, that it's got two aspects of it. One of them is that, and let me back up. This will also depend on if you buy just the on-demand content or the on-demand content in conjunction with the live classes. If you buy them where you have live and on-demand, you would work through the on-demand content yourself. There's also going to be homework that you're going to have to do in the form of assignments that are going to get reviewed and graded so that you can see where you can be able to improve upon. Then there's the live classes. Because we have people joining at all different times of the year and the month and the way that people go about in their expertise, the live classes are not structured per se in the same way that the on-demand classes are structured. For example, this past Tuesday, we started a discussion in regards to the incident, what some may consider an incident, in regards to the performance issues that Netflix had. So we started the conversations in regards to what would a IPTV-like architecture look like? What would we be designing there? What type of protocols would we have there? What are some of the things that we need to consider? And we use that as a launching pad for, actually it's going to be tomorrow's class, where we're going to be introducing a group project. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference there in regards to what you'll see on the on-demand program compared to the live. But the nice thing about the live is it allows you to ask your questions, be on camera with us, come off mute and ask the questions via Zoom. But it also allows us as instructors and mentors be able to take topics that are in the moment and then be able to take a look at it and take the assumption or take the role of the architect and then bring it towards the students. We found that group projects are very important to the development of up-and-coming and aspiring architects. That's why we like to have this flexibility of being able to insert them at various times of the years. So that's one reason why the live classes do not follow, let's say, a one-by-one kind of structure that you see with the on-demand classes.
And let me tell you why I hate cohorts and will never do cohorts. Here's what happens in a cohort. They bring in 20 people that know absolutely nothing of what they're going to do, and they train them together. Now, when you're stuck, there's nobody to help you because you're with 20 other people that know absolutely nothing. And I can remember when I was an undergraduate, I took a health assessment class as part of my undergraduate degree, and they handed us a book that we had our stethoscopes, and they said, go practice on each other. And I said, what do you mean practice on each other? Where they're like, look at their eyes, look at their ears, look at their nose, look at their throats, listen to their carotid arteries for broes, listen to their heart, listen to their lungs, push on their belly. And I said, but I don't know how. And they said, well, start pushing on each other's bodies. And I looked at the person next to me. They looked at me. And you know what we learned out of that class? Not a whole lot. Now, later when I was being taught to be a nurse practitioner to practice internal medicine, something different changed. Now, when I was in class, they had people that were nurses for 20 years in the program. They had pharmacists in the program that wanted to be able to prescribe. They had physical therapists in the program, and now we were all in class together. Now we had a health assessment class, and they showed us how to do it, and each one of us that had abilities and different abilities helped each other. And we got that class, and we learned so much. I've also studied martial arts for over 30 years. And if you're in a room that's all white belts and you train all white belts together, everybody gets hurt because the white belts are the most dangerous people, the new people that don't know their limitations. If you run a martial arts class, you've got a black belt or a couple black belts that are experts. You got some brown belts that are pretty good. You got some red belts that are some skills, and you've got some junior people. And that way, if you're teaching someone how to throw a punch, for example, and it doesn't look right, the black belt can show them how to fix it. But if it's in a room of all white belts or all newbies that don't know anything, somebody's copying somebody else that's not doing it wrong. That's the first reason I hate cohorts, because I love that that you can have people that have various levels of experience in a project. So my students are working on an architecture project. People that signed up last week are going to watch and learn from the senior people. The senior people will lead this project, and as they get hired, those junior people move up, become senior people, and lead the next one. And these people that are a little scared and new, watching in the background, become intermediates, and then they start to help. They grow off of each other. The other reason I hate cohorts is this. When I took my first 10-day, $11,000 CCNP boot camp back in 1998, was it? Wow, it's a long time. When I left that CCNP boot camp, I didn't have a job. And I was out there wandering, trying to figure out how to get hired, and every day losing the skills that came in that CCNP boot camp. To me, that is absolutely crazy. So by not doing cohorts, by not doing batches, if you join me today and something happens in your life and you need to take 6 months off and it takes you 18 until you're there. So for those two reasons, by the way, medical people and martial artists are trained, where you bring in people of various experiences and levels and you train them together. You're not running around blind leading the blind. And you all learn from each other and you all make it better. And you all build a strong alumni network. And you've got somebody that gets hired that you know that now drags you with them. So that's why I choose not to do cohorts. I kind of hope that makes sense. I really want our students hired when they're done, and I don't want to limit their time. So matter of factly, okay, your 16 weeks is over, get out. I don't care if you're with me for a year. I want you hired. I just want you hired.
And with that comes flexibility, right? We need to have flexibility in it to be able to allow for things that we call unforeseen occurrences. You never know what's going to happen in life. And sometimes we have things happening. Sometimes we get distracted. We have seen people come back after 3 months because something happened to them, death in the family, they had to regroup. There's different things that happen. So flexibility is the key of the program. And you'll also notice that it's baked into everything that we do. We don't want to pigeonhole people with certain things. That's why we even give our students the ability to, if they, let's say they start off with just one particular program, but they notice over time that they want to upskill and they want to have other ones, we work with these students, provide them flexibility in being able to upgrade to a program that's going to satisfy their need in that point. And then the same thing applies. As Mike says, you stay in the program until you get hired. And even then, you're always welcome to come back, participate, and pay it forward, as you always said. We have many guest lectures that come in that have been students before. They have great architecture careers now and roles that they're in with fabulous companies. And they come in and they give away. They literally give away for free. Nobody's getting charged extra for it. They give away their experience and their understanding, their knowledge, their wisdom to our students that are in the program, in the thick of it right now. So again, that's the beauty of not getting pigeonholed into a particular group schedule, such as you would with cohorts.
Yeah, like Friday, we have someone that was a software developer for 20 years. He came to us a year later. He's working at a cloud provider. So he's going to be coming in from that cloud provider. He's going to be teaching our students about application architecture. And that's great because he knows a lot more about it than non-application architects like a cloud architect.
All right, let's go on to the next question. And I believe this is going to be from Francis as well. They're wondering, would students for the Enterprise Architecture program be prepared for a TOGAF certification?
Absolutely.
Let me put it this way, and then some. I think the TOGAF is going to be the least of your concerns when you join the Enterprise program. The Enterprise program is like nothing out there. I can tell you that right now. You're going to get information, everything from system designs to learning how to be CXO relevance. You're going to learn sales skills in there. You're going to also learn the leadership skills. You're going to learn executive presence. That's going to be part of that. And something that many times that you don't see any program really out there have is stakeholder management. Being able to do that, how do you manage the stakeholders? Something very important, especially when you sit at the upper echelon of this enterprise architecture role. So there's so much more that comes with it, Francis. So TOGAF is a small part. What I would recommend if you want to, aside from joining tomorrow's architecture, the webinar where we actually dive down and we do dissect most of the cloud architecture role, but if you want, you can come off mute. We'll ask a couple more questions, address your concerns. But what I would suggest, especially since we have that 60% off special that was already posted in there, here's a direct link to the Enterprise Architecture program. Take a look at that as well. Convince yourself, see all the details. There's way too much in there for me to take up now 30, 40 minutes trying to go down the list of everything that's included in it. So take a look at that page. I think it's going to have everything and then some of what you're looking for. So, but an answer short, yes, and then some.
And last night we had fun in our enterprise architecture training. I was teaching my students about opportunity cost because you can only invest your time, effort, or money in one. And then we looked at various technology projects and we looked at the opportunity cost and we calculated the ROI on them and the expected value so you could build the business case. We had all kinds of fun last night in the enterprise architect class. We also did a lot of risk calculations. So you know how to get budget for your cybersecurity projects.
And by the way, it has to be fun because that's part of your job when you become an enterprise architect.
Yeah.
But again, not to scare anyone, but those that are truly interested in the enterprise architecture program is really business focused and business driven. So it's unlike anything you see it out there. You're talking about getting information and knowledge literally thrusted upon you that it would take you years upon years to gather, going through masters and business degrees that you would require to get that kind of knowledge. This is all succinctly crammed, in a sense, if you want to think it into one concise program to help you get the skills necessary to be a competent enterprise architect. Let's take a look at the next question, Tyrone, please. And this is from Kennedy. Welcome back, Kennedy. They're wondering, Mike, for internship programs with Amazon, what should one expect in the interview, and what value and principles does Amazon hold dear?
Okay, Kennedy. So whenever you're in sales, you really want to think what's in it for the client. So I'm not going to go to a client with a router that can do 100 gigabit per second out of 1,000 ports and talk to them that it can do 100 gigabit per second out of 1,000 ports on a switch. I'm not going to talk to them at all about that. They don't care. I am going to talk to them, for example, with being able to push 100 gigabit per second out of 1,000 ports on a switch, what new services that enables that business to do. What does that enable them to make their backbone do, which means what new applications can they do? Can they do some kind of cool high-definition video thing that they've always wondered? Can they create and manage self-driving fleets of cars? I have no idea, or planes that are out there. The point is what's in it for that business after understanding that business. So if you look at what's in it for Amazon to run these internships, and nothing against Amazon. So what's in it for Amazon? And let's look at the way Amazon does their training. Amazon training intentionally does not tell you what the technology is, which means you can become an AWS solutions architect professional. And unless you really understand server virtualization, and you understand what a bare metal server is, and you see where that hypervisor is, and you understand processor cores, and you understand the difference between different processor cores, and you understand single versus multi-threaded applications and how they would run on these cores. And if you don't understand the number of PCI lanes on that CPU and how that can pertain to the number of GPUs that can be used in that server, and what the backplane of that server can do, and what those PCI slots to do to even figure out what those network cards can do and push on the wire. If you don't understand that, but all you know is that AWS's EC2 is a whatever it is, you can't do anything. But it's intentionally not in the training programs. Most of the cloud providers' technology, and it's not just AWS, they don't tell you what the technology is. And here's the reason why. Most of the technology started 20 to 30 years ago. And it's great technology. We still use it today. But it's hard to make a 30-year-old thing sound exciting. A private line existed in 1985. But a direct connection or express route sounds so cool and exciting. So they're not telling you what's in it. So what's really going to be going on in this training, they're going to get you to fall in love with Amazon products. That's what's in it for them. They want you to know how to use the Amazon stuff and get excited about Amazon stuff. So what's in it for them is if you don't know the underlying technology, but you know what all this cool stuff is, you're going to be recommending stuff. And if you're bought into that AWS well-architected framework, which is a set of guidelines that makes recommendations on the client without even knowing what the client needs, you're going to be recommending things that are very good. Now, pragmatically, any recommendations without knowing what they need is like a doctor writing a prescription for the entire state of Florida without knowing what the conditions are. Here, everybody, you get a pill. But, you know, in medicine, they wouldn't do that. So what's in it for them is to get you excited about Amazon tech, to get you to learn their recommendations, and to get you to learn how to use their stuff. How does this benefit them? We have a whole lot of AWS trained people out there, which makes employers feel good about using AWS solutions for two reasons. One is if there's a lot of certified people, the certification itself costs less to hire the people because it's a supply and demand thing. What pays is not the certification, it's the actual architect skills. So if you learn the architect skills, you'll always do well, but just keep that in the back of your mind. So it's to get you excited about using and recommending AWS. So now that you know that, and let's be fair, Kennedy, it's not an AWS thing. I'm not saying anything negative about AWS. Lots of vendors do these same kind of training and certification programs for that reason. If you're excited about the tech, you'll talk about the tech, and that is great marketing for them. Grassroots marketing. And people tend to recommend what they know because they're comfortable with it. So by making you comfortable with it, you're even more likely. So what they're doing is they're planting seeds of people that can be future sales teams, future marketing teams. So that's what's in it for them. So what do they need to hear? Well, they need to hear that you're excited about them and you're excited about what they can do. Because that's the person they're looking for. They're looking to create an influencer type. Someone excited about it. Maybe someone that wants to do a cloud builder thing and further spread and evangelize the AWS word. So they're looking for that. That's what they're looking for. How about those AWS leadership principles? I'll give you a secret. Every business has those same leadership principles. Everyone. You can find a well-run business in the last 20 years that doesn't have 90% of those same principles. But having said all of that, they hold those principles dearly and they want to hear about them on an interview. So, what does somebody really care about on an interview? For real. I wouldn't care if Mark had 1 week's experience or 100 years experience if he was great. It's not what I need to hear. I need Mark to prove to me that he knows something. And I can promise you, Mark can prove me that in about a second and a half with his competency. I need to know that I can trust Mark. I have to. I need to know that Mark is going to research stuff before he just does stuff. And any new employer needs it because I don't want people that are going to be there. I want people that are not going to sit around and watch bad things happen and say nothing about it. And that's one of their principles, but so is it as far as every other business. I want people that are curious. I want people to go home and say, I don't know, and then go research it and learn it because that makes my team better. I want people that don't make a lot of mistakes, leaders that are right a lot. I don't want people making mistakes all day. I can't afford to hire people that make mistakes all day. A wise man learns from their mistakes. A wiser man learns from others' mistakes. So I want people that are meticulous that don't make a lot of mistakes. Now, having said that, Kennedy, anybody would want to hear that from you. And guess what I've seen? I don't know you very well. You connect with me on LinkedIn, please, Kennedy. But, I always see you trying. I always see you working. I see you taking advantage of every possible opportunity you have. That's something I tell them. I mean, you stuck through 2 weeks of our CCSP cybersecurity training. You were there all day, every day, and I know you had a job too. That's someone that fights. That's who I want on my team. In fact, I'd rather take someone that's 95% as good or even 90% as good. That's so energetic that they're going to do whatever it takes to be great than I would someone that's a little better. Because that kind of attitude, that kind of thirst, whether it's learn and be curious for Amazon or whether it's me or what I hire for it, it's the same thing. I hope that helps.
Yeah. And Kennedy, and this is for everybody else, Mike briefly touched on it. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying this is right, this is wrong. But in every company that you go into, regardless if it's Amazon, it doesn't matter if you're taking certifications, whatever it may be, anything that's associated with a company, there's an aspect of it where that company needs to sell you on that vision. Part of that reason is that they need to keep you motivated and wanting to go forward. If you have some skin in the game, if you have belief in what the company is trying to do, you're going to be more productive and you're going to be a better member of the team itself. So a lot of that aspect of that internship program that you're discussing has to do with, and again, I'm not using this in a negative or positive connotation, but it's a form of indoctrination if you think about it, a way of getting you to think about it in the way that Amazon wants you to think about it, to make you the best that they can make you in the context and the confines of what they will require of you as you go further. Something that I would recommend to you, if you're really strongly considering an internship program with them, is do a Google search for AWS and then type in leadership principles. This is their fancy way of designating of some of the things that they're going to be looking from you so that they can define their values and their principles. So don't be just fooled by the term that they're using some executive language leadership principles, but you can Google it, take a look at it, and it gives you a better idea exactly of what they might be looking for. So just wanted to throw that out there so that you know about that.
And Kennedy, before we move on, I made a YouTube video about those principles. Tyrone, if you can find it and provide it in the chat box. Does the enterprise... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is again a question from Francis, just kind of piggybacking. I'm going to let you answer that one too. It says, does the EA, which is the Enterprise Architect Program, encompass the Tech Leadership Development Program, or are these two separate programs?
So the Tech Leadership Program is part of our Executive/Elite Enterprise Program. What I will tell you is that program itself took a lifetime to build, that elite program. And why it took a lifetime to build was it took that everything that I've learned in 30 years as an architect. I had a bunch of business school professors create additional MBA type training that was needed, and they teach in MBA programs. And it took every piece of business, leadership, tech, interview, brand, everything that we put into that training program. I will tell you that in the Enterprise Architect Program, we have a significant percentage of the Tech Leadership Training Program in it, but not all of it. But what's in it is substantial in the Enterprise Architect Program. And I call my Enterprise Architect Program a light version of that elite program, in that it still has so much business acumen in it, and so much leadership, and so much executive, that honestly, it's just such an exceptional program, and there's enough leadership in there. I have no problems with people that end up having our Enterprise Architect Program and tend to at one point want to upgrade to that executive piece by paying the difference. But I think you would get a lot of good, strong leadership, more than you would imagine in that Enterprise Architect Program. It's a very strong program.
Yeah. Let's do this too, since we're already discussing this Enterprise Architecture Program with Francis. Tyrone, can you bring up the two-parter from San Francis? We'll read it off. Let's see if that works. Just give 1 second, Mike.
Sure.
All right. Let's do this. I think what's going on is both Tyrone and myself are having some of the technical difficulties today. Let me read off from the chat so that we have it on audio.
Sure.
Francis says, Mike, I'm strongly considering the enterprise architect route and have interest in tech leadership. I have the tech background and leadership experience and plenty of degrees, but I would be transitioning into an EA role, and I was considering AWS security, not security, SA. I'm blanking on the extra, but it's a pro certificate. Thank you. Do I need it for what he's trying to accomplish when it comes to the enterprise architecture role?
Well, we have to understand that there's nothing in the AWS Solutions Architect Professional that has anything to do with architecture. It has everything to do with systems administration and nothing to do with architecture. And the name of that exam is honestly the worst thing that ever happened to architects. And it's the thing that's causing people to be confused with architecture. Companies hire architects to do architecture work. And then out of nowhere, AWS had a solution architect textbook that had no architecture in it and a certification. So it is that. So what is the point of certifications for architects? Because, Francis, there's no such thing as a CEO certification or a CFO certification or a chief architect certification or any big leadership job. So why do we get certifications as architects? Well, certifications create what I like to call the illusion of competency. If I didn't interview 1,000 AWS certified people and I saw AWS certification, I might think good. And then I'd bring them in and interview them. Now, I got to tell you, I interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people. Less than 100 knew what cloud computing was. Less than 50 knew what a virtual machine was. And less than 25 knew even what a router was. And that was because they were previously network engineers. So, there's no architecture in it. But that illusion, that certified, does get me excited to bring someone in and talk to them. So realistically speaking, my favorite certifications for architects are, and they are what they are for as follows, and I'll tell you why. One of them is the CISSP. And while the CCIE and CCDE are always my favorite certification, the CISSP probably has the best return on what do you call it? Or return on investment capital. And here's the reason why. So the business guy's not slipping on a business word. And here's the reason
Too many
why.
acronyms. That's all this is, Mike.
Yeah.
Too many acronyms.
Yes, exactly. So as a CCIE, and here's why I say best investment, it's about 50 to 75,000 pages of reading, and it's 1,000 hours of labs, and it's $20,000 if you're going to be inexpensive to pass through that exam. The CISSP is a solid exam. It will give you end-to-end security fundamentals from a business perspective, and that isn't that challenging. It's not easy, but it's not that hard. I will tell you that to put it into context, I took a 5-day boot camp that was brought in by an expert instructor to Cisco. And at the end of the 5-day boot camp, I passed the CISSP. Had I not had an expert instruction and had a good, strong networking knowledge, I would tell you that it would take about 6 months to do that CISSP for regular, normal people. And in that 6 months, they would learn a lot, but they would learn it in the business context. Versus the average person would take 2 to 3 years to do the CCIE, and it would cost at least $20,000. So the CISSP will get you an interview. It teaches you so much about security, and it gives you a lot of high-end big picture of the world, including the business side and risk. So I like that. TOGAF 10, definitely on my list. And of course, I teach this. And of course, we teach the CISSP and all this stuff, and all of our programs, they all have access to this training in some way, shape, or form. Now, I like the TOGAF 10 for the following reason. It gives you a process to do things again and again. I used to hate TOGAF. I hated it because it didn't teach anything related to architecture. And 20 years ago, when we had a test like the CCIE that actually taught you networking and things like TOGAF, which didn't teach architecture, it made no sense to me. And then I started working with more and more enterprises. And I started looking at the mistakes they made and the mistakes they made and the mistakes they made and the mistakes they made. And pretty much if they followed a systematic approach every single time, they wouldn't have made those same mistakes in most cases. So that is the reason that many years later, I like TOGAF. I also like it because, again, certifications in our world are about getting an interview. And it's up to our training and our expertise to go from the interview to hired. So I use those two, the CISSP and the TOGAF 10. I will tell you that I would probably do an AWS Solutions Architect Professional or Azure Solutions Architect Expert, and that would be the limit of the certifications I would do. I would probably do all three. And why is that? Because a lot of workloads are on the cloud, probably half at this point, and it's going to probably stay around half. More stuff goes to the cloud, more stuff leaves the cloud, new stuff goes into the cloud, different stuff leaves the cloud. So it's where the cloud's going to be used. And by doing it that way, you've got something that's enterprisey, you've got something that's security, and you've got something that's cloud. And that way, especially if you're well-trained, if the economy tanks and you get a cloud architect job, you're prepared for it. If you're in more enterprise architect roles, I think you're also going to be, again, in pretty good shape. So I kind of hope that helps kind of guide you a little bit.
Yeah. And again, certifications are just a ingredient, you might call it, to your overall development. So you want to keep that in mind. What I will say this, we always talk about opportunity cost, meaning you want to invest your time, efforts, and your valuable resources into things that are going to help you develop your career and get ahead. But I'm going to put it this way, just because we're all a bit different. Some of us will still need something a little bit more structured. Our training program has everything laid out from A through Z when it comes to learning the technologies, understanding them in the confine of what architecture or an architect will need to know. Now, will there be times when you yourself might want to learn a bit more about these because perhaps you're in a job role already, you need to learn a little bit more about it, or perhaps, and this happens to all of us, it catches our fancy. We start enjoying something we read. You know, for Mike and myself, it was networking, and it develops then into security. For others, it was perhaps not security networking, but they fell in love with the aspect of what it means to manage and architect applications. Others will have databases and so forth. There's different, very, very different things. So if your time allows it, and if it doesn't interfere with the overall development and the time frame that you have set for yourself in when you want to be getting to your end goal of becoming a enterprise architect, you can do the certifications, but keep in mind, they are not necessary ingredient towards your overall development towards that role. And I would even caution you, or, well, let me put it this way. I would actually like for you to be aware of this matter and then give you a caution with that. Most of the things that vendors put out there, and there's very few vendors that do a very good job at balancing this. Cisco does really good with it. I've taken plenty of training. I know Juniper has done a wonderful job. The cloud providers, I can see why it's a challenging balancing act for them, because they want you to use their services. So a lot of their training is going to be revolved around you learning their services, what they mean, and when to use them. So it's not very agnostic or neutral when it comes to your development as an enterprise architect. So from that perspective, be aware of it, be cautioned. When you do join the program, and I hope you do, Francois, you'll notice that our focus is not so much on the certifications, but it's actually be able to develop you so that you can get the job. And there's a big difference between these two that you will find out. And you'll have the opportunity, of course, also to have live interactions with us. We have a wonderful Slack community where we answer people's questions. And you know what? The wonderful thing is it's not always us that answer the questions. It's people that have been in these programs, that have gone through what you have gone through. Those are also very valuable resources that you'll have access to and be able to learn from them as well. So it is really a multifaceted approach, and a little ingredients here and there. And sometimes, what they say in cooking, maybe you need to add a little bit extra spice, or maybe a little bit of flavor of something that you like. All of us are a little bit different in that, but I'm pretty sure if you decide that this is something for you, as you've mentioned, you already have strong interest, you will not be disappointed, to say the least. In either case, we do have that 60% off. And what I would tell everybody, for those that are more interested in learning more about cloud architecture and the career involved in it, and then the total breakdown, make sure you download the free ebook that goes along with it. And then join us tomorrow for the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. And feel free to come off mute, ask us questions. Mike has a wonderful, I believe it's about a 20, 30-minute presentation. I never timed it. It just goes by like this. Time flies during the presentation, where he breaks down all the details that you'll need to know about the actual career itself. And then, and this is the fantastic part, it's not unlike other webinars where they give you 20 minutes or 30 minutes maybe to ask questions. We have dedicated about 90 minutes of 120 minutes just to be able to interact with you, have you ask your questions, and let us give you input to those questions as well. So it's a very unique style of webinar that you'll be able to get to. Roy Morales says, in the amount on an annual basis or one-time fee for the program. When you look at the actual page, you have various options. You can do a payment plan if you'd like, or you can do a one-time payment for the program, Morales. So
yeah,
you have those options. Go ahead.
I don't
Mike.
think that was actually I don't think that was the question he was asking. I think he was asking, is the fee an annual subscription or is it one time? It's one time. Okay. We don't have subscriptions to our training programs. People buy them, and it's a one-time purchase. But we do have payment plans where it could be either one time, 3 months, or 6 months. And yes, the discount applies to all payments if somebody uses a payment plan. It wouldn't ever be just one. That wouldn't sound fair or ethical in any stretch of imagination. And San Francis, I'm telling you, you can use that coupon on the Tech Leadership Program. And if it doesn't, send an email to info@GoCloudCareers, and I'll make sure it works for you.
All right. Fantastic, everybody. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect webinar. And in case, we always invite you to join us next week again. We'll have a wonderful Q&A session. Bring your questions today if you have any. And aside from that, Mike, do you have any closing statements for today?
So, as always, I love meeting everyone here. I get to meet people and talk to people from all over the world. I absolutely love it. And I hope we were able to guide you. Now, tomorrow, we're going to have that webinar that Mark talked about. Please join us because it's on Zoom. I'll talk about what we do, go over the role, and then I'm there for literally any question you want. And I mean it. And if you want me to review your LinkedIn profile, I'll do it while we're on here. You want to see if you're ready, you're certified, and think you're ready for an architect interview, I'll ask you 2 or 3 architecture questions. And if you can answer them, guess what I'm going to say? You are ready. And you know what? I'll stick around for an extra 15 minutes to get through these last couple of questions that are popping in. Yeah, I'll wait an extra 15 minutes. Tyrone, if you're back there, send a message to my admin and ask them to push meeting everything I have back, or make sure that I'm clean until 4:30. So yes, I'll take care of these questions. So
you want to address Daniel's question, Mike?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So from Daniel Nimley, he's wondering, can you discuss the hidden jewel about Cloud FinOps? Will it be added anytime soon?
So Daniel, let's talk about what FinOps is and why FinOps is not the solution and why FinOps is important. But FinOps was created because of bad architects. So Daniel, if you design the solution correctly, you don't need FinOps. The reason we're dealing with FinOps is 90% of the architects out there lack the skills necessary to design the right architectures, and things were moved to the cloud that shouldn't have been moved to the cloud. They were put on the wrong kind of technology, and the architecture was bad. So what FinOps is, just to let you know, in medicine, we have preventative healthcare and we have emergency healthcare. And here's the difference. Preventative healthcare is my wife when she practices as a cardiologist, and people come in and she manages their blood pressure, she manages their triglycerides, she manages their cholesterol, she makes sure they're on diet and exercise programs, she scans their everything and makes sure they don't have any cardiovascular disease, and she keeps them from going to the hospital. That is preventative. That's what a good architect does. They design the perfect solution. Now, I've got another friend that's an interventional cardiologist, and what they do is when someone's heart vessels are so blocked, they stick a catheter in and they use a balloon to compress the plaque in the side of the arteries, and they stick a stent in. Now, that is when the person's ready, so they don't die, you make an emergency procedure. So in the one case, you're protecting the problem, and in another case, you're fixing the problem. If the architects that come out of my program don't make these kind of mistakes where they actually need FinOps so badly. So I kind of hope that helps. Would we go down FinOps? I don't really know, and here's the reason why. We're architects. I've been an architect for 25 years. David Lithicum's been an architect for 30 years. So when we have people in our programs that are teaching, they're leaders in their field. They've been published on major media. They're all in major publications. For example, whether it be CIO Magazine, Tech Republic, Tech Radar, but they're in big things. They're all speaking to the press. They're all known for their influence into society. And I can offer that with our cloud architect or enterprise architect or AI architect or any of that. I don't know if I can do it with FinOps to that level. It doesn't mean I may not consider other people for that in the future and bring in some experts in. But it's not my strength. But I'm all about getting the architecture right in the first place, preventing that 70 to 80% failure rate that businesses just have, and then get to the point where we can optimize cost-wise afterwards. And I think FinOps is becoming more important because most of the architectures are disasters, 80%.
It's interesting how we come up a whole domain of the discipline just because the architecture went awry to begin with, and now we got to go back and fix it, create new departments, create new roles. So it shows how crucial it really is to try to get things, I don't want to say 100% right, because if we could, we wouldn't be human, but as close as possible to 100%, right? That's the whole kind of like when you go into your risk assessment, what you can and cannot do without. So, but very good question there. Tyrone, if you can put up the message from Kennedy. This is for Mike specifically. Just want to put it out there. We'll put it on YouTube so that everybody knows. We can remind Mike. Go ahead and post it up, the comment from Kennedy. So Mike, Kennedy saying, please remember to send me the resources you promised. And thank you very much in advance.
Oh, okay, Kennedy, I am more than happy to send you something, but I can't actually remember what it is because I work 16 or more hours a day, 7 days a week. So please do this. If you're not a connection on LinkedIn, send me a connection on LinkedIn. Tell me what they are because I wanted you to connect with you on LinkedIn anyway because I admire you so much in so many ways, and I'll make sure that I get it to you. So please do so. And it's very possible I can't remember because my lifestyle is absolutely crazy.
Yep. Or on the flip side, you can also connect with me, Kennedy. Let me know what you need, and I'll get a hold of Mike, and we'll make sure that you can get the resources that you want. And by the way, that goes for everybody. You're always welcome to find us on LinkedIn, connect with us. That way, you can see the different posts that we put out. We put fantastic messages out there every day. Some of them are very motivational for you to keep going and what you're doing. But also, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're trying to guide people to focus on the important aspects of their career development instead of bombarding you always with the same things that you hear a lot of people do. And that is like, oh, this protocol did that and that technology did this. This is more focused towards your actual development in your career. So that's going to be the important part. Tyrone, let's go ahead and let's bring up the question from Sans Francis, please. Oh, sorry, I missed the question then. Okay, wonderful. So from YG, they were asking which cloud is best to study as of right now?
Okay, so that is a great question and probably one of the most important and the most dangerous questions that are out there. Which cloud should you study right now? You should learn the cloud, not a cloud provider's cloud. And here's what I mean by this. Every single cloud provider offers virtual network and data center services. They're offering exactly what we've done in the network and the data center for the last 30 years. So in the data center, we have a router. In the cloud, we have a virtual router. In the data center, we have a physical load balancer. In the cloud, we have a virtual load balancer. In the data center, we have a storage area network called block storage. In the cloud, we have a storage area network called block storage. In the data center, we have a physical firewall. In the cloud, we have a virtual firewall. It's the same stuff. In our data center, we have Kubernetes. On the cloud, we have Kubernetes. So the key is, do you learn the cloud or do you learn a cloud provider's cloud? Now, the first thing we need to know is what career you want. And here's the reason. If you are going to be an engineer, not only do you need to learn what is the cloud and learn the underlying technology, you have to learn how to configure it. So in that particular case, I would look at what's the dominant cloud in your area. And it could be AWS, it could be Azure. For example, I live pretty close to the Caribbean. That's Azure land. The Caribbean, for the most part, is Azure land. So if I was living in Jamaica, which is a great place, by the way, I'd probably study Azure if I was going to be a hands-on engineer after I learned cloud. Now, if I was in Ohio, I'd probably learn AWS because there's a little more AWS out there. So it's that. But I would learn the cloud. And here's why I want you. If you know what a virtual machine is, for real, it doesn't matter if you're in a VMware cloud, a Nutanix cloud, an OpenStack cloud, an Azure cloud, Oracle cloud, Google cloud, AWS cloud, you know what it is. Then it's just like, all right, these marketing cuckoo people at this company called it Elastic Compute Cloud. These marketing people called it a compute engine instance. I don't know how they thought about it. Somebody else called it a virtual machine. Whatever. It's just marketing at that point. And it's kind of like if you learn to drive a car and you get into a Honda because that's your first car. My first car was a Nissan, but the Honda I got, no, his next car was nicer, so I had a Nissan. And when I left that Nissan, I got a Honda Accord, and guess what? I turned the key in, and it had the same accelerator gas, or it had the same brake, and it was fine. Next car I got was a Volvo. Now, okay, I had to figure out where the windshield wipers were because that was in a weird spot for me, and the AC was in a weird spot. And then I swapped it out with a Mercedes, and I didn't need to go back to school because I knew how to drive. So if you learn all the networking and data center things, you know all clouds. And then you spend a couple of days and you can get certified in anything. So don't learn any particular cloud. Learn the cloud. Now, if you're an architect and you don't need to configure it, you just need to know what the tech is. So understand that virtual machine, understand the block storage, understand block storage weaknesses, understand where to use block storage versus object storage. And you don't care at that point whether it's blob, S3 or cloud storage on Google because it's the same thing for object storage. So if you're an architect, you still want to get certified in one, so pick one. But if you're a cloud engineer, you're going to have to know the tech, and you're still going to know how to configure it. And that's where I would say after you learn the cloud, pick the one that's going to be most common in your area that people are using.
Yeah. And I'll give you a practical reason why you should learn the overarching technologies compared to specific vendor ones they give. And that is, you can pretty much then apply to any cloud job that you want. It doesn't matter if they're going to list AWS on there. It doesn't matter if they tell Google, Microsoft, Alibaba, Oracle, IBM, and the other 50 that spot up for that. Because all you'll need to do then at that point is, because you already have the underlying understanding, is go through it and wonder, okay, what are the 200 services that you guys give these funky names to that I need to just quickly understand? Okay, all right, EC2, it's okay, compute, I get it, virtual machine, no problem. When they start talking about particular storage mediums, you look at the funky names that they give them, and then you remember, oh, Mike told me, and then you know that it's either block, object, or file storage, and no big deal, and you go from there.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about this is, and Waji, I tell you this way, I'm not a huge fan of especially the associate level type of certifications on the cloud side, not because I think that they're bad, but because I dislike the fact that I have to spend so much time just learning funky names of services instead of learning actually why are the services there. So from that perspective, learn the holistic cloud is going to get you a lot further than it will when you just focus on a particular vendor type of training. But if you need to later on, you're always welcome to go do it, because you never know. You might get in a position where it's required you to know more details about a specific platform that a cloud provider has, because even though I believe, and Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong on my statistics, but I think it was 98% are now businesses have multi-cloud strategies, meaning that they have more than one single cloud provider.
Yes.
So if you do happen to find that 1 or 2%, and believe it or not, I saw this job description the other day where they just had one, and I was like, really? But if you do find that one, guess what? Now you know what to focus on in regards to being able to, nail that interview. So in case you do come across a unicorn like that, it's also not going to be a big deal. Let's move on to our next question, please. And this is from Sans Francis. They're asking, Mike, appears you are recommending the enterprise program over the tech leadership program.
So San Francisco, that's not exactly what I'm recommending. You said your goal is to become an enterprise architect. And our tech leadership program, and I'll tell you what I would recommend if you wanted to take that, because I love that program. But our tech leadership program is like a tech-focused MBA, focused on the exact leadership and business needs that you would need to grow from a cloud architect to an enterprise architect to a principal architect, a distinguished architect, and or moved into a director or senior director role. That's what's in that tech leadership. But in the tech leadership program doesn't have an architect program inside it. It is just business, executive, and leadership. So if you were to take the tech leadership program by itself, you're still going to need architect training to get an architectural role, since that was your guidance. So what I was saying is, if you take the enterprise architect program, it's a very good deal because it takes a lot of the some of the key elements from the tech leadership program, and it merges it with the enterprise architect program. Now, if you wanted to take the tech leadership program, and I created the program of a lifetime, it is our elite program. And what it is it's our enterprise architect program plus the tech leadership programs, the components that are not there, and our tech interview mastery program. And by doing so, we give you all the business acumen. We're focused on how to tune and optimize your interview and your branding profile to teach you how to negotiate that extra difference. Because if you looked at that principal architect role for Google that I showed, where the average pay was $508, the pay range was $399 to $677. I'm sorry, $394 to $677. And that's almost $300,000 difference. So in that elite program with the tech leadership and the interviewing, what we're doing is we're giving you those C-suite skills that you see in very few architects. And then we're really teaching you how to control the interview and take the interview and negotiate more to get you more. So It all depends on your goals. If you are already an enterprise architect, I'd say take that tech leadership program. It's going to be rock solid for you. But if you don't know how to be an enterprise architect yet, and you want to be an enterprise architect yet, I want you to have the skills to be the enterprise architect. And that's going to be in that enterprise architecture program. But you can get 60% off of our, of our elite program, which is that tech leadership program, our interview mastery program, which is live as well as this enterprise architect program at 60% off now. And if you were trying to do the tech leadership, I would want you to do that because it's going to be a much better deal for you. I'm not trying to run up people's bills. I'm just trying to get them to their goals at the cheapest cost possible. I hope that makes sense. Please feel free to ask more.
All right. Let's take a look at our next question, please, Taron. And this is from San Francisco. They're asking, who is your ideal student? Would it be some beginner, mid-level roles, senior executive roles? What would you consider a ideal student, Mike?
My ideal student is someone that is an intelligent, that has a good work ethic, that has a good degree of focus. Someone that's willing to do whatever it takes, willing to go through the work, and wants to learn. That's my ideal student. And why do I say this? I say this because Daniel Bosel was a high school dropout, but he still made it through and was hired by JP Morgan Chase. By comparison, Robert Welch was a 61-year-old, or no, 59-year-old. No, he was 61 when we got him hired. And he had all kinds of tech backgrounds, and we had to work on his communication, presentation, and executive skills to transition him out of engineering into an architecture role. But he did great. Now, salespeople are really easy to train in general, and I'll give you a couple examples and why. Wallace Agana was a sales rep, took our training, and went straight into an enterprise architect program at JP Morgan Chase. Jermaine Houston was selling landscaping gear, and his first job was as an enterprise architect at Southern New Hampshire University. And he got a lot of big offers as well. Nurses? Nurses are easy. Medical professionals are easy. Psychologists are easy. Honestly, anybody can come. But why do I say salespeople are typically easy? Anybody that's ever been, or healthcare, anybody that's ever been part of a job where they had to speak to people a lot, where they had to be emotionally intelligent, where they had to learn to ask the right questions and collect information, and then get all that information and analyze that information before they make a decision, those people are typically people that do well. So any kind of medical thing, any kind of law thing, any kind of sales thing, anything where you're used to doing consulting. I've had management consultants go through, but honestly, I've had waiters go through. I've had social workers become architects. Nurses become architects. It's more about the person's characteristics. It's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
it's really about the character.
Yeah, Hannah says lawyers, day traders. You're going to have quite an analytic mind, attention to detail. The nice thing about lawyers, I'm going to give you this, you're going to know how to carry an argument. So that's going to be critical when you're talking to customers, being able to understand the psychology of how to weave together the argument, how to structure your sentences, and how to draw things that you, and again, you will have to be ethical because it'd be easy to manipulate people, but be ethical in the way that you steer people towards something that would be of benefit to them. Now, day traders is an interesting one because while it might seem like it's a technical role, it is very an analytic role. And what you're doing is you're taking in a lot of supplemental information and trying to make a decision based on if you're going to take a trade, if you're going to carry a trade over, or if you're going to have a long-term or short-term solution or strategy to your trade. But the nice thing about day traders, when they do things right, and that's why I think this is a really good kind of profession if you want to transition to it, is that day traders in general, or traders, have to have the understanding of what proper risk to reward management is. So from that perspective, you're already doing some type of risk analysis, risk assessment, understanding what it takes to structure certain business ideas to make sure that you stay in the green and you don't go into the red, or the black, and we say into the red. So, and the nice thing about that, of course, is if your risk to reward analysis is correct, you generally always going to be budgeting for at least a 1.5 to 2 point compared to your risk. So that's always good, Hannah, in that sense, those two. But I'm going to cap it off with this, and I think Mike will agree. whatever your experience is, either if it's none or if you're coming already in with architecture experience, the key is be teachable.
Yes.
If you can be teachable, if you can put into your mind, you know what, I came here to learn something that I did not know before or that I want to improve upon, you will leave all that baggage, all that ego, you leave it at the back door and you're ready to do this. So if your first, I guess, trait or character is that you can be teachable, sky's the limit for you. And I think that's what Mike is also looking for, somebody that is teachable and that is willing to go forward and do the work.
Yeah, they're the most successful people.
Yeah. And by the way, that's in all profession. Even when you go to a job role, be teachable. Don't be a know-it-all. Be teachable. Take in information, understand the culture, and so forth. Okay. So let's take a look at our next question, please, here, Tyrone. And this is from TM. They're wondering, since my plan was to do Network Plus, Security Plus, the CCNA, the RHCE, which I believe is the Red Hat Certified Ethical Hacker one.
No, it's an engineer.
Okay.
Strong sysadmin.
And I will finish off with Go Cloud, AWS Solution Architect, and Go Cloud Architect. Is this the long way around? Yeah.
So TM, first is we need to know what your goal is. I'm going to work on the assumption you'd like to be a cloud architect or solutions architect because you're saying you'd like to arrange in our training. But first thing I would tell you is I would scrap the Network Plus. I would scrap the Security Plus. In fact, I have a video that I talked about why you should not do them. So when we look at certifications, it's not that the Network Plus is a bad certification. It's not that the Security Plus is a bad certification. The question is, when I look for certifications, is two things. Do you have enough skills when you're done them to get a job? And the answer is, if you have an A+, Net Plus, and Security Plus, the answer is you will not, in most cases, have enough skills to do the job. And will a hiring manager want to talk to you if they see those certifications on your resume? And the answer is generally no. In fact, I generally take them off of a resume. And the reason I take them off of a resume is like when you see a CEO's resume, they're not going to put that they can type at 30 words per minute on it. And in the context of architecture, that's what these CompTIA certifications look like. Now, the reality is they're great certifications. They're what I call pre-fundamental certifications, but they're not going to give you any of the knowledge you need to do the job. RHCE is a Linux certification, and guess what? There is no Linux for cloud architects. So what I would say is all this time that you plan on doing, all those things that you're going to doing, they're not going to get you any closer to being a solutions architect or a cloud architect. And why do I care? Well, the average cloud architect earns about $1,000 a day or $20,000 per month of work. And if you spend 1 year learning the Network Plus, Security Plus, CCNA, and RHCE, you'll still be 100% unemployable, and you'll be losing $1,000 a day from a tech perspective. So I don't want that. What I would tell you is networking, you need a lot more than the CCNA, but you don't need all of the CCNA. If you started with our program now, in about 8 to 12 months, not only would you be able to do the job, you would not have a Security Plus, you would have a CISSP. You would not have, you would have a TOGAF 10, and you would have a solutions architect professional or an Azure solutions architect expert, and you'd have the skills to do the job. And 9 months from now, you'd be ready to get hired or potentially working, earning good money. Whereas if you do the Net Plus, the Security Plus, CCNA, and RHCE, guess what's going to happen at the end of the year? We're going to have to start you from scratch. And doing the CCNA or getting the networking knowledge from Mark or I in the program is a little different. We've got a networking fundamentals section, which includes a lot of the CCNA things. But you know what the CCNA doesn't include? Any data center design, which we need for private clouds. You know what the CCNA doesn't include? Any BGP. Do you know what the CCNA doesn't do? Any kind of route aggregation, summarization, or switching, or anything that really matters from the architect level. But we have it in there. So you can take our class. You'll easily skate through the CCNA. You'll easily skate through the CISSP. You'll easily skate through the TOGAF 10. And now you have something on your wall that looks big and powerful and strong. And look, I like the Security Plus. It's a great, what I call pre-fundamental certification. But you really need to train pre-fundamentals when you can take something like a CISSP, which starts at the bottom and works its way up to give you everything you need. So that's why I don't typically do those beginner pre-fundamental certifications. Here's the other reason I don't do them. It's what everybody else does. Everybody. And hiring managers know that after interviewing, say, a hiring manager's probably interviewed 5,000 people. And after interviewing 1,000 people with an A+, Net+, and Security Plus and say, you need to go back and get trained, they're just not going to be likely to hire you. Now, that doesn't mean there's not people with a Net Plus and a Security Plus and an A+ that are rock stars. Because what your certifications are has no bearing on your actual skills. None whatsoever. I worked with this guy, Ted. I was a CCIE. Ted had nothing. Ted was the best network engineer. I mean, he'd forget to shower. He'd be smoking in the office, even though it was not allowed. His t-shirt would be ripped, but he was a rock star of an engineer, and we all depended upon him. He had no certifications whatsoever, and who cared? Because he was that great. But it's all about being great. So I kind of hope that helps. That's why I wouldn't do that. These are all focused on like junior level how-to technician work. And unfortunately, learning how to be an airplane mechanic does not teach you how to fly the plane. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and TM, just so that you understand, it's not that we're saying that any of them are bad, but this is now very specific into what you're trying to aspire towards, and that's to be a cloud architect. There's a lot more efficient and concise training that, even if you don't go with us, that you can take. But it would not include the Network Plus, because Network Plus is redundant if you're going to take the CCNA. Security Plus, honestly, good information, but going for something like a CISSP, brand name recognition, and it's going to get you a lot more views and contacts with recruiters compared to something like the Security Plus.
Yeah.
The Linux aspect is very simple. Are you going to be an admin? No. So there's zero necessities to take something like the RHCE, the engineering Linux one. So that put that aside. The cloud certifications, eventually you'll pick one that you feel comfortable with, but go with something that is more professional, meaning that you skip the whole nonsense about the 500 products and they're trying to sell you on as to why it's important. Skip all that eventually, and without training anyway, you'll skip that. You understand what the foundations are of the technology, and then you can go past it and say you got the certification just for that. So in essence, unfortunately, you would be going the long way around, but only because you're training actually for the wrong role when you do it that way. You want to train for the right role. So just wanted to keep that in mind. When does the sale end? I believe, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it ends at, is it the end of this month? I don't even remember.
Actually, so this is a bit odd. So it's a Black Friday sale that Chris and Alonzo set up, and they have a certain number of slots for sale, and when they're full, they're full. I tried to stay out of it. I'm like, Chris manages the operation, Alonzo does the marketing. I've been behind the scenes creating something that I've been real excited about. I've been teaching a lot of classes, which I really love doing. I've been doing boot camps, so my team is really good and they do these kind of things. And that kind of enables me to do what I love, which is going out there and just helping people and teaching free boot camps and teaching the classes and creating architecture courses and getting people hired.
Yeah. So my suggestion also would to be, Francis, take advantage of it now if you can. If something does happen, let's say a couple of days from now, you try to go on it and all of a sudden there's no slots, connect with us on LinkedIn and so forth. Let us know. And then perhaps we can pull some strings, see if we can convince Alonzo or Chris to maybe help you out on that aspects. But to avoid that completely, take advantage of the sale that we have right now. Aside from that, as we mentioned a few times, we do have that 60% sale right now. Somewhat limited. I can't tell you what the numbers are because Chris and Alonzo wouldn't tell us. They purposely wouldn't tell us because they knew we might say something. So that's why we're like, we don't know. But take advantage of it if you can right now. If you're interested, you want to ask more questions, tomorrow we'll have the webinar in regards to how to get your first cloud architect job. Even though it is called that, we do welcome questions if you're interested in the enterprise architecture. Many people do ask ELSA questions, more networking and security related. And then, of course, we have people always interested in the idea of what is entailed or what are the possibilities when it comes to generative AI. So the webinar is not specific to any of them, but if we have the ability and the time to answer your questions, we will definitely do that. Aside from that, Mike, do you have any closing statements for our wonderful viewers today?
Join us tomorrow on the free webinar. Check out the description of this video. We've got guides to help you with an interview. We've got guides on how to become a cloud architect and AI architect. There's so many free guides that we actually write in for ebooks, so go check some of them out. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all in our webinar tomorrow, and hope to see more of you soon. Take care, everyone. Actually, I guess if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe, and all that stuff. I'm learning YouTube. Take care, everyone.
There you go. Give it a thumbs up, everyone.